Hello friends. This is Fictional Vortex. How are you all? So in this video, we will see what if Naruto become the new Sharingan of Konoha. Summary. And the night during the Uchiha massacre, Naruto ends up in the compound trying to fight Itachi, who for his efforts decided to give Naruto a gift. The Sharingan. But before we start, if you want more stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe and like this video. And if possible, share this video with your friends. Now let's start the story. Kuso, a 6-year-old blonde child ate as he pulled a kitchen knife out of thigh. It wasn't that deep, but it still hurt like hell. Damn, villagers are starting to get crazy. Naruto Uzumaki sighed as he closed his eyes to catch his breath. He's been running around for a few hours now, and he finally found a place to sit and rest as the villagers looked for him. Naruto stood up and took a deep breath before he walked out of the little alleyway he was just hiding in. He peeked around the corner and saw no one. He took a sigh of relief as he walked out and quickly but cautiously walked back towards the apartment Hokage Ojiji had given him. There's the demon. Get him, he heard from behind. Chancing a peek, he turned his head to see a mob a little bigger than the one before. Mentally cursing, he took off as fast as he could to get away from the mob. Get back here, he heard before he rushed behind a corner and came face to face with another mob. Oh, shit, he said as he turned to run, only to find that the other mob had finally caught up. Shit. What the hell do I do? He panicked. You die. One of the villagers charged, brandishing a thick stick. Naruto ducked under the horizontal swing coming for his head as he turned and saw an opening between the mobs. With a burst of chakra to his feet, he was out of there. Now don't get me wrong, his chakra control sucks. But he can control it enough to be able to run fast and jump higher. A few moments passed and he outran them. He turned into another alleyway and sat down, waiting for his breath to replenish. Geez, frickin' villagers, he wheezed out as he took another breath to even it out. He sighed as he got up and checked his leg. It was healed. Why did all his wounds heal so fast? He didn't know. He poked the very faint scar and sighed. He stood up straight and cautiously peeked out the alley as to not run into another mob. He eventually got onto the street that held his apartment. He walked up the steps and unlocked the door. As he got in, though, he realized that they vandalized it. Damn, he sighed as he started cleaning up before jumping to the shower and eating a cup of instant ramen as soon as he got out. Such a long day. The 6-year-old sighed to himself before changing into his pajamas with the weird nightcap. He dozed off, not knowing that he was about to meet the thing that made his life with the villagers miserable. Mindscape. Naruto awoke to the sound of water dripping. What the? He said as he stood up and looked around. The place looked and smelled like a sewer. Looking around, he spotted what seemed to be the only way to walk, so he stood up and walked through the tunnel till he came across a tall and wide cage with a white paper with the kanji for seal decorating the front of it. Walking up to the gate, he peered in, only to be met with large claws protruding from the bars. Naruto stumbled backwards and stared through the bars till two enormous eyes opened, revealing crimson irises with slits for pupils. The giant monster suddenly grinned, revealing many sharp teeth, especially the canines. So, I suppose you're the human keeping me from my freedom, it suddenly said, startling Naruto. What are you? He stuttered out, looking at the thing's eyes. Hey, me, I'm the great Kyuubi no Kitsune, he said, looking down at him. Wait, you said that I'm keeping you from your freedom? After receiving a nod, he became very angry. So, it's your fault that the villagers treat me the way they do? He shouted at the giant 9-tailed fox. Watch your tone when in my presence, mortal, he growled out, glaring. No, I'm not afraid of you, Kyuubi-tem, he shouted, seething. I just growled before sighing and closing his eyes and mumbling whatever. Naruto just sat down and calmed himself before opening his eyes to look at the giant fox, his 9 tails swaying around in agitation as he was still annoyed with the small blonde. How did I end up here anyway? He asked no one in particular, but being the only one there, the fox shrugged. I don't know, and I don't really care. As long as I get my sleep, we'll be just fine, he said, closing his eyes again, and a light snore started up. Raising an eyebrow, Naruto stared at the beast again and mumbled whatever. He laid down and fell asleep, waking up in the real world. The next day, Naruto awoke with a groan, the night's conversation still fresh in his mind. Was it just a dream? He thought to himself, before the deep voice of the fox sounded in his head. It was no dream. You can hear my thoughts. Obviously. Naruto rolled his eyes and started with the usual morning ritual consisting of a cup of ramen, a shower, brush teeth, get dressed and leave for the day while locking the door on his way out. Geez, kid, you gotta cut down on the ramen intake. It's unhealthy. Ah, does someone care? Grr. No, I'm just saying. Whatever. He sighed as he walked through the streets, ignoring the glares he got and the whispers directed his way, saying something about demon brat. He honestly didn't care. As long as they didn't get physical, which usually didn't happen till nightfall, he would survive. So for the remainder of the morning he walked around mostly in the park city, ing on the swing sets that nobody used when he was around. Soon came lunchtime and he checked the brand new frog wallet he got from Hokage Ogg, which he named Gama-chan, and found a good enough amount of money in there before heading off to his favorite new restaurant, Ichiraku's. Hey old man, ayame ne, he said cheerfully as he ordered his usual 5 bowls of miso beef ramen. When the order came, he dug in, making small talk to unimportant to put in the story. Lol, and left paying for his ramen. Now, what to do, he thought to himself, tapping his chin as he walked. Noticing where he was, he took a look at the Hyuga compound and smirked, running off to make preparations for his newest prank. A few hours later, he had been around town all afternoon looking for a shop that would sell him some water balloons and paint. When he finally did find one that charged him triple the regular price. He didn't care though, as long as he got to complete this prank he didn't care. He filled one of the balloons with a multitude of colors before he snuck to the main branch's house door. He tied the balloon to some ninja wire he had and took a shuriken and found a bush to hide behind. He waited, and waited, and waited, and waited. Damn, where are all the HYUUG? Wait, someone's coming. He smirked as he got ready to throw it. As soon as the figure was outside the door, Naruto flung the shuriken, cutting the ninja wire, dropping the balloon on Hiyashi Hyuga's head. Bursting out laughing at the now colorful Hyuga, he failed to notice that was coming at him till he was just a few feet away. Oh shit. Naruto cheesed it out of there as fast as he could, stopping in front of the Uchiha compound to catch his breath, but before he left he heard a female scream. Being the knucklehead he is, he rushed in to help. He came to the main house and went inside. He walked around and saw her. He knew her as Sasuke Uchiha, the female protege of the clan aside from her older brother, Itachi. She seemed to be holding her head in pain. Naruto rushed to her side and tried to help, but when he looked up he was horrified. Blood. There as lots of blood and the dead bodies of Sasuke's parents. Who did this? He whispered to himself. And as if answering his question, Itachi's voice carried from over to the side of the room. Hello, Naruto-kun, he said, all emotionless like. Itachi, did you do this? He stuttered out. The older Uchiha looked at Naruto and a strange smirk crossed his face as he nodded. Naruto's Riso. Elv hardened when he nodded. He stood up and, like the idiot he is, charged Itachi, getting knocked to the side. Naruto sat back up and rushed him again, only to be knocked away again. You're too weak to fight me now, but I'll tell you what, I'll give you a little gift for your courage, Itachi said, walking up to Naruto and proceeded to knock him out. He did an eye operation on both his eyes. Don't make me regret giving you this gift, Naruto-kun. And with that he disappeared. The fox grinned as he played with the genetic structure of Naruto's new eyes. He made it so Naruto could activate and deactivate his new Sharingan eyes. The next few days were spent in the hospital with Sasuke as she recovered from the Tsukiyomi being used on her. And Naruto getting used to his new eyes. Somehow the fox get them to be the same shade of cerulean blue as before. Naruto. He heard Sasuke call from the bed on the other side of the curtains. Yay, he replied, rubbing his eyes. Thanks for helping me with Itachi, she said the name angrily, like she wanted to rip his gut out with her bare hands. Yay, no problem, he said, looking into a mirror at his blue eye. I wonder what he meant by gift. Well, I'm gonna go to sleep now. Goodnight, Sasuke, he yawned. Good night, she replied, yawning herself. This could be the start of a beautiful friendship. 6 years later. Get back here, Naruto, shouted a few Chunin Konoha in as they chased the now 12-year-old blonde through the village. Hee hee, you'll never catch me, Naruto shouted back. Armed with a paintbrush and in a large pail of paint, he defaced the large faces of the Hokage. One of his greatest pranks he's pulled in a while. Turning a corner, he pulled up a sheet painted to look like fence. He stood there and waited as the running footsteps neared and then faded away. He sighed as he pulled down the sheet, revealing his unusually large grin. Scratching his right whisker marks He watched the retreating backs of his pursuers. Hey, they'll never catch the master prankster, Naruto Uzumaki, he exclaimed, turning around only to come face to face with the angry expression of none other than Iruka Yumino. Uh-oh, Iruka-sensei, Naruto yelped, gaining a frightened expression. Iruka gained a tick on his forehead. Naruto, why did you skip class? He asked, staring at him. Naruto glanced at the Hokage faces and then tried to hide the pail and paintbrush he was holding. Don't even try to hide them, he said in a scolding tone. Naruto scowled and dropped them. Geez, can no one take a joke around here? He said, shaking his head, as he suddenly felt ropes tie around him, binding his arms. Hey, what's this about? He shouted, trying to wiggle out of the bindings. I'm taking you back to the academy. And the bindings just to make sure you don't escape again, Iruka answered as Picked grabbed a length of rope like a leash and led Naruto back to the academy. Oof, Naruto grunted as he was seated on the floor in front of the class. Damn, Iruka-sensei, why do I have to sit here? He thought, looking at the students sitting around just staring at him. He could easily pick out the few friends he had made over the last 6 years. First there was Shikamaru Nara. He was the heir to the Nara clan. He was also the single most lazy street student Naruto had known throughout his years at the academy. But despite that fact, the kid was a freaking genius when it came to written tests and stuff like that. He had also taught Naruto how to play shogi and go, which the two played on the weekends and when they skipped class altogether. He wore a fishnet shirt with a gray vest over it. On the right-hand side he had what looked like a blue stop sign. For pants, he wore brownish pants that ended above the ankle with some medical tape tied to his right thigh. His hairstyle reminded Naruto of a pineapple, which Naruto constantly teased him about. Currently the black-haired Nara appeared to be asleep. Next was Choji Akamichi. This big guy was the heir to the Akamichi clan. He was Shikamaru's closest friend. He was pretty nice. He usually shared with Naruto when he forgot his lunch. Also never call him fat, or he would become angry. And that, my friends, is not something you want to see. He also meant to have an endless supply of barbecue-flavored potato chips. He wore a yellowish-white shirt with a red symbol on it. Over it, he had a green open button-up t-shirt on with some medical wrap on his forearms, wrists and hands. For pants he wore shorts the same color as Shikamaru's with medical tape covering the part of his legs the shorts didn't cover. His hairstyle was sorta like Wolverine's, only brown. He also had 2 red swirls on his cheeks. He currently was staring at Naruto munching away on a bag of chips with an amused glint in his eye. Third was Ino Yamanaka. She wasn't really Naruto's friend per se, but they did hang out whenever she hung out with Shikamaru and Choji while they hung out with him. She helped out at her family's flower shop near the middle of the village. She wore a purple top that would show her midsection had it not been for the medical tape wrapped around her midsection and lower ending just above the knees. She also wore a purple skirt with slits on the sides running up to the waistband. She also had on a pair of white arm bands with purple adjusters. She had long blonde hair which was lighter than Naruto's and pupil-less blue eyes. Currently she was staring at the blonde boy with an annoyed expression. Fourth was Kiba Inuzuka. The Inuzuka is often short-tempered and impulsive, but in Naruto's opinion, that's what makes him a great friend. They are usually found skipping class together. He and his dog, Akamaru, were usually found hanging out with Naruto after school when he pulled most of his pranks. He was usually found wearing a gray hoodie with the fluffy edges on the hood and the cuffs. For pants he wore almost the exact same thing as Shikamaru. His eyes were black slits, with red fang-like paint on both his cheeks. Him, like the rest of the class, had his eyes on Naruto, a small smirk on his face. Fifth would be the Hyuga heiress herself. Naruto considered Hinata a friend regardless of her clan's treatment of him. Mostly cause she acted nice to him. But she always managed to turn beet red and faint. Why? Naruto was too clueless to figure it out. Man, I felt like sweat dropping here. She wore a beige hoodie with the hood down and a yellow circle with a flame in it on each shoulder. She wore the same pants as the two boys, can you believe it? Geez. Only the female version of it. She had short bluish black hair and white pupil-less eyes. Sixth was the Aburame heir. Like Ino, Naruto only knew Shino through other friends, though this time the friends were Hinata and Kiba. Naruto thought he was sorta creepy. I mean, with his stoic expression and all, it creeps him out. That coupled with the fact that he can control insects. Of all things, shiver asterisk. Anyway, he wore a white long sleeve with a tall collar that somewhat hid his face. For his pants, he wore the exact same thing as Shikamaru. I mean, come on, what with these pants anyway? His hair spiked up, much like Naruto's, and he always wore a pair of sunglasses. Seventh was the pink-haired kunoichi hopeful, Sakura Haruno. Sakura was book smart but wasn't all that great in the field. She had low chakra reserves, which sucks, but on the upside she has near-perfect chakra control. Naruto has had a crush on her since the beginning of the academy. But she always turned him down when he asked her out. But during the last year his crush on her began to wane and redirect elsewhere. 3 guesses and the first 2 don't count. Much to the Pinket's relief, she wore a pinkish-red dress, which ended a little below the knees. She wore black spandex shorts under that. She had pink hair with a ribbon holding it up and keeping her bangs out of her face. Last but not least, the person he considered his first and best friend in the class, Sasuke Uchiha. They had been friends ever since that day in the Uchiha compound when Naruto had been running away from a certain colorful Hyuga and he ended up in the Uchiha compound. He remembered seeing her there holding her head as if in pain and seeing Itachi there with a bloodied short katana in his hand. He remembered rushing him twice, him saying something about a gift, which he still didn't know what he was talking about, then darkness. When he came to, he was in the hospital. But ever since then they had been friends. He kept her out of the darkness she would have fell into had she been alone. Though she'd never admit it, she actually gained a small crush on him. Once they entered the academy, though they had agreed to act as though they hated each other, always calling each other Dobi or Tem. But they still always hung out after school. She wore white shorts with some medical tape wrapped on her calves. She wore a blue t-shirt with a high collar. It exposed her midsection a bit. It also had the Uchiha fan symbol on the back. She also had on white arm bands that covered her forearms with blue adjusters. She had long bluish black hair that ended about half down her back with the 2 bangs still in the front. Her black eyes stared at the tied-up blonde bow. Why in front of the class, a gleam of amusement with a small smirk on her face. Naruto sat there. When his eyes landed on Sasuke, he immediately saw the amused gleam in her eye. Grumbling, he looked back at Iruka, who seemed to be contemplating something. His punishment for skipping probably. He sat there and waited till Iruka finally spoke. Tomorrow's the graduation test. Now's not the time to be goofing off like this. He scolded Naruto, who just looked away and scowled. Whatever, he mumbled, and since he was looking away he didn't notice the look of anger on his sensei's face. Time for a Henge no Jutsu test. Everyone line up. He called out. What? The class called out, clearly annoyed that Naruto decided to skip again. Transform perfectly into me, he said as his face now held a look of annoyance instead of one of anger. Grumbling about how this is all Naruto's fault, they lined up. A few students later it was Naruto's turn. Next, Naruto Uzumaki. Iruka called. This is all your fault. One of the students behind him said. Like I give a damn. He replied, forming a ram seal. Chakra began to swirl around Naruto. Henge, he called out, as the smoke that engulfed him started to fade away, revealing a blonde beauty in his place with smoke still covering his assets. Iruka was sent flying back via nose blood rockets. Wahahaha, I call that one my sexy no jutsu, meh. I forgot the Jap name, he said with a big grin on his face as he dropped it. However, Iruka didn't seem to think it was all that amusing. You moron. Don't invent useless skills, he screamed at Naruto using the big head no jutsu. Later that day, Naruto was grumbling as he scrubbed the paint from the Hokage faces. I won't let you go till everything's back to normal. He heard Iruka call from the Hokage's head that he was cleaning. So what? It's not like there's anyone at home waiting for me, he replied, scrubbing a bit harder than necessary, indicating that he was a little angry. Naruto. He looked up to see what his sensei had to say. Once you're finished, I'll take you out for ramen. My treat. Naruto's eyes turned to stars. Yosh. I'll get finished as fast as I can. And with that he started to scrub faster and more efficient than before. At Ichiraku's, Naruto was packing away the ramen like it was going out of style. Which of course to him wouldn't matter cause he'd probably eat it anyway. Naruto. He turned mid-slurp to Iruka. Was his brilliant reply. Out of curiosity, why did you do that to the Hokage faces? Don't you know who the Hokage are? He asked, taking his chopsticks and a bit of his own ramen. Of course I know. The Hokage are the highest ranked shinobi in the village, nay. Naruto said as he began inhaling the ramen again. Then why? Iruka asked, staring down at the blonde who was finishing a bite before answering. 'Cause one day I'll claim the title of Hokage, he said. He suddenly held out his chopsticks and pointed them at Iruka. And I'll surpass all of them, he shouted with a huge grin plastered on his face. After a few moments of silence, Naruto suddenly turned and suddenly asked Iruka, I have a request. Another bowl, he asked, looking at the blonde who just shook his head. No, I was gonna ask if I could borrow your hitayate, he said with a pleading tone of voice. Iruka's hand reached up and grabbed the hitayate. No, this is what you get when you graduate the academy. Naruto instantly face faulted and shouted out, bummer. Well, whatever, cuz I'm definitely gonna pass tomorrow. We'll see, Iruka said, finishing his bowl. Well, I'm going home for the night. See you at school tomorrow, Naruto. With that he got up and left Naruto sitting at the counter. The next morning, Naruto sat on the bench with his head on the desk. He was tired cuz he stayed up late practicing academy jutsu. The only one he had trouble on was the Bunshin no Jutsu. Every time he made a clone it came out all deformed and dead looking. Kyuubi had said it had something to do with his reserves being too high. Flashback no Jutsu. Naruto put his hands in the ram seal and began to concentrate his chakra. Bunshin no Jutsu. A puff of smoke appeared beside him. As it cleared it showed a color drained, deformed and dead looking clone. Maan. Naruto complained as it disappeared. Your chakra reserves are too high for such a low-level illusion. A voice sounded in the back of his head. What? He asked out loud. I said your chakra reserves are too high for such a low-level illusion. Meaning, you have too much chakra to use it. And since your chakra control sucks, why? Oh, you can't control how much chakra you put into it, so you end up putting in too much so the clones come out looking all dead. Explained Kyuubi. Oh, was his brilliant reply. What if that was the test tomorrow? What was he gonna do? He shook his head as he started to practice again. Flashback. Kai release for those who don't know. Closing parenthesis. Naruto practiced well into the night on that specific jutsu, and the only thing he improved on was he managed to make a twin for his dead clone. Hey, Dobi. Naruto lifted his head and saw Sasuke taking a seat on the bench beside him. He waved a greeting. So far them and a few other students were the only ones there. Where were you yesterday? She asked him as he put his head back down. Did you see the person cleaning the Hokage faces? Nah, that was me, he said tiredly. Why are you so tired? She asked, staring at his tired blue eyes. Oh, 'cause I stayed up practicing for today's exam, he replied, putting his head back down on the desk. Was his reply. About a half hour later the rest of the class piled in along with Iruka. Naruto and Sasuke went back to ignoring each other as usual while in class. Alright class, today is the graduation exam, Iruka called out as he looked around at all the students as he spoke. His eyes landed on Naruto as he said, all you have to do is make 2 identical clones of yourself using the Bunshin no Jutsu. Come to the next room when you're called, he said as he took Choji Akamichi, hooray for alphabetical orders, into the room with him. Over the next half hour Naruto was sweating like a pig. He knew it was gonna be the Bunshin no Jutsu, he just knew it. Groaning, he heard Sasuke get called. Good luck, he whispered to her as she stood up. She nodded as her response and left to the next room. When she reappeared, she was wearing a leaf Hitai-8. Congrats, he said as she took her seat beside him. Naruto Uzumaki, Mizuki, a Chunin Academy instructor, called out. Naruto paled and got up. Come on Naruto, you can do it, he tried to encourage himself as he walked into the room. Okay Naruto, do a Bunshin, Iruka said looking at his clipboard. Naruto nodded and made a ram seal, and started to concentrate as little chakra as possible. Bunshin no Jutsu, he called out, and with a puff of smoke 2 clones appeared, but the thing was they were the exact same as all of them. The only improvement was they got some skin pigmentation back. Sweat dropping, Naruto turned to Iruka, who had used his big head jutsu to yell out, "You fail." Naruto flew back, startled, and stared at Iruka. Iruka turned to look at Mizuki. We could let him pass. I mean, he did create the required number of clones. No way Mizuki. I mean sure he created 2 clones, but look at them. Naruto's sweat dropped. They look dead and they're totally useless. I can't let him pass. Naruto turned and walked out of the room, gritting his teeth. But instead of walking to the classroom, he went straight out to his favorite spot. The swing out in the front of the academy. After about a half hour sitting there, the graduates came out to see their parents while Naruto sat on the swing watching. He saw some people looking at him and whispering things to each other. Hey, that kid. The one on the right side whispered. Yay, that's the kid. He's also the only one to fail. The one on the left whispered back. Well, that's a good thing. He shouldn't become a shinobi. The first one whispered. Since he is, shish, we're not supposed to talk about it. The second one scolded. Gritting his teeth, Naruto put his goggles back on and left the schoolyard. Walking down a few blocks away from the academy, he heard a few footsteps behind him. Naruto, came the voice of said person. Mizuki-sensei, he said, recognizing the voice. He turned around to look at him. Come for a walk with me, he said as he turned and walked off. A few minutes later, on a nearby roof, Naruto sat on the edge, dangling his feet off the edge, while Mizuki stood and looked over the village, thinking about something. He suddenly began to speak. Iruka-sensei is a very serious person, he said as he turned to look at Naruto. His parents died when he was young, and since then he had to take care of himself. Naruto nodded. But why does he pick on me? You probably remind him of himself, he answered. Oh, but I wish I graduated, he mumbled to himself as he swung his feet back and forth. Mizuki looked thoughtful for a second before he spoke. In that case, I have a special secret, he said, looking at Naruto out of the corner of his eye. Naruto got excited and began bouncing in his seat. What is it? He asked, looking at Mizuki with hope-filled eyes. It's a special way to graduate. And with that, Mizuki explained to Naruto what he had to do. A few hours later, Naruto snuck into the Hokage Tower and was currently tiptoeing to the secret scroll room, when suddenly, Naruto, what are you doing in my house this late? He heard the third's voice from behind him. Sexy no jutsu, Naruto shouted out, causing him to transform. What are you do? He stopped mid-sentence to see a beautiful blonde there wearing nothing, with only smoke covering her. The third fainted from blood loss that night. He. Naruto went on his way, running through the halls. When he got to the room, he saw a big scroll with the words, "Forbidden Scroll of Sealing," on the front. This is it, he said as he tied it to his back and left to the forest where Mizuki said he would meet him. When he got there, the clearing was empty. He said he would be here. Oh well, I suppose I could read the scroll to pass the time, he said as he ignored the warning about it being forbidden and opened it anyway. Okay, first is Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, he said as he read the instructions. Put fingers in a cross seal like so, he said as he crossed his finger and began to concentrate his chakra. He trained like this for about a half an hour before finally getting it right. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, he called out, and 2 puffs of smoke appeared. There stood 2 perfect copies of Naruto. Hey, yeah, I did it, he shouted. He stood up and walked up to them. You don't look like illusions, he said as he put his hand out and poked one of them. 'Cause we're not, the one he poked said. That is awesome, Naruto called out as he dispelled the clones. He walked up intent on learning another jutsu when Iruka came into the clearing. I found you, he said between breaths. He looked like he has been running for a while. Iruka-sensei. Naruto looked at him, confused. Wasn't Mizuki the one that was supposed to meet him? Hey, you found me. I was only able to learn one thing, he said smiling sheepishly while rubbing the back of his head. You look all beaten up. What happened here? He asked the blonde, who just shook his head and said, never mind that I'm gonna do an incredible jutsu and then you'll let me graduate. Iruka raised an eyebrow. He's been practicing here enough to damage his body. Iruka thought as Naruto put his hands in a cross seal. Suddenly Naruto heard whistling through the air as he was pushed back and Iruka was impaled by shuriken and kunai alike. Iruka-sensei, Naruto said staring at his teacher in horror as Iruka stared at a branch with a dark figure crouched on it. Nice job finding the moron. Mizuki's voice filled the clearing. As he stared at the blow, ND who was currently getting to his feet. I see, so that's what's going on, Iruka said through clenched teeth, as he stared at the shadowy figure on the branch. Naruto, give me the scroll, he called out to blonde who was dusting himself off. Naruto, no matter what, don't give him the scroll, Iruka said as he pulled out a few kunai from his body. Naruto, there's no point in having it. I'll tell you the truth. Iruka's eyes widened. He didn't dare tell him the truth, would he? 12 years ago the demon fox attacked the village and stuff, but already know that, don't you? He said as he looked at Naruto who was currently looking at the ground listening to what Mizuki had to say. The truth is the fox was never killed. He was sealed inside a newborn child. And that child was you, Naruto. You were the nine-tailed fox. He shouted at the 12-year-old who was currently shaking. Mizuki raised an eyebrow at his behavior. Why is he shaking? Ha ha ha. He just burst out laughing at the white-haired Chunin who was currently really confused. What are you laughing at, demon? He shouted at the blonde who was currently in hysterics. I already knew that, moron, he said as soon as he calmed down. He stared at the figure of Mizuki in the tree who had a shocked expression on his face. So what if you know? Everyone hates you. Iruka's no different, he said hoping that would get to him. It did. Don't lie to me. Iruka doesn't hate me, he screamed at the figure in the tree. His breathing picked up as he clenched his fists in his teeth. Kid, wanna try something new? He heard in the back of his head. Sure, I guess as long as it makes Mizuki suffer for lying to me. Very well. The fox's voice sounded in the back of his head followed by maniacal laughter. He suddenly felt a foreign chakra in his coils. He felt 4 pokes in his hands when he looked. He saw 4 holes in his palms caused by the claws which were now his fingernails. He felt his elongated canines poking his lower lip. With a feral grin he put his fingers in a cross seal. I'm gonna make you pay for lying to me. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, he called out as 5 clones appeared around Mizuki. Let's get this party started, they all said in unison. And with that they began beating Mizuki into unconsciousness. Naruto felt the chakra leave his coils as he calmed down. Iruka-sensei, are you alright? All 5 clones asked in unison as he went to go help him pull out the rest of the kunais. They're all solid, Iruka said as he winced from the knives being pulled out. Yep. Naruto grinned sheepishly and rubbed the back of his head as he dispelled them. Iruka looked thoughtful for a few moments. Naruto, close your eyes. Naruto obeyed and felt his goggles leave his head as warm fabric took its place. Open. He opened his eyes to say. Iruka smiling down at him with his Hitai-8 missing. Congratulations, Naruto. You are now a genin of the leaf, he said with pride in his voice. Naruto's face instantly brightened. Really? That's awesome, he shouted jumping in the air then jumping into Iruka with his arms around him. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, he kept repeating. And Iruka just pat him on the head. For a special treat I'll take you for ramen. Naruto's face, if even possible, became even brighter. Yay, he shouted pumping a fist in the air. Here is the start of a very long ninja career for Naruto. Naruto awoke bright and early that day. Excited to see whose team he gets on, he rushed through his morning routine, which this time consisted of a shower, food, which was toast and milk. And a good teeth cleaning. As he got dressed he looked at his orange jumpsuit, and said, out loud, man, I'm a ninja now, and if I keep wearing this I'll be like a big orange bullseye screaming, kill me, I am an idiot. He shook his head, resolving to use a henge to buy some new weapons and clothes after he leaves from the academy. He left his apartment with a big old grin of his face. Proudly wearing his new leaf Hittite asterisk. He walked through the village, holding in a laugh, as he watched the civilians' reactions to his new ninja rank. Most of them were surprised. Some looked mildly disinterested and others had looks of disappointment, and on very few had angry expressions. He had just about burst out laughing at the ones with angry expressions. When he got to the academy he sat in his regular seat beside Sasuke, who, no matter how early he left, she always beat him there. She looked surprised at him for a second, then up at his Hittite. Thought you failed, Dobi, she said with a smirk. He nodded. I did, but I showed Iruka-sensei something even better than a regular bunshin, and he reconsidered. She raised an eyebrow. I'll show you if we got on the same team, he said with a foxy grin. She just nodded. For the next few minutes the class filled up. Most people who saw Naruto just raised an eyebrow but shrugged it off as if it were nothing, which to most it was nothing. Naruto thought that today would actually be a good day and no one was gonna ask him what he was doing here. He was wrong. Naruto, what are you doing here? Some random student asked. Naruto just raised a hand to adjust his Hittite. Isn't it obvious? He said, holding in a smirk as the kid got angry. Can you move out of my way? The boy turned around and came face to face with a person a little taller than them with dark hair. Naiko Hikari. Naiko Hikari was a few inches taller than Naruto. He had longish dark spiky hair, the bangs of which he kept held out of his eyes with his Hittite. He wore a pure black t-shirt with a long-sleeve fishnet shirt under it. He wore cameo pants that were a little baggy but comfortable and easy to move in. He wore black ninja sandals, each with a white lightning streak on the outside. Personality-wise, he was just like Kiba. Loud, obnoxious, always ready for a fight, but he can be serious when occasion calls for it. To Naruto his worst quality was that he was one of Sasuke's Shutter fanboys. Naiko stared at the person, who nodded and walked away, promising Naruto he would be back at lunch. Naruto, move so I can sit beside Sasuke-chan, he said in an irritated tone. Naruto turned his head to him and shook his head. Naiko quickly became angry at the blonde. I said, move it, and I said no, Naruto countered, although this only offered to fuel Naiko's anger. He grabbed the blonde's collar and pulled him to his feet. When I say move, you move, he said in an angry, ordering voice, layered with command, but the blonde just shook his head. No. Naiko's fist connected with the blonde's jaw as soon as the word left his mouth. Sasuke cowled when his head got thrown back and she could see his lip was bleeding. The pain didn't bug Naruto. No, it only fueled his own anger. Naruto reached his hand up and gripped Naiko's wrist. Let go. He waited for a few seconds. When he didn't move, his hand started constricting around Naiko's wrist. Naiko started gritting his teeth as the pain began setting in. But he wasn't gonna let go. No way was he gonna let go. Naruto smirked as he felt the joint begin to crack. But just before he broke it, Iruka came in. He scowled. Naruto, let go of Naiko's wrist. Naiko, let go of Naruto and go sit down. Naruto grumbled and turned around, only to be pushed from behind by Naiko. He closed his eyes as he stumbled forward, and as he landed his lips met with something warm. It felt like another pair of lips. He opened his eyes only for them to be widened to the size of dinner plates. He was kissing Sasuke. Oh shit, he was so dead. He jumped back and started apologizing. Then he turned to Naiko, who was just as surprised at what happened as the two others, and began glaring daggers at him, muttering bastard, before Iruka could shoo Naiko down to his seat. Sasuke was pissed. Safe to say it wasn't at Naruto, but Naruto could still feel the covered-up killing intent leaking out. Thinking it was for him, he dropped his head on the desk and waited for Iruka to start. All the while Iruka was just watching, amused, trying and succeeding to hold back a chuckle. But he closed his eyes and started thinking about what he was gonna say. After a few moments he started. Starting today you are all real shinobi. But You are all still genin. The hard road that lies ahead has just began. Now, you will all soon get missions to help the village. But first you need your 3-man team and a Junin sensei, and you will follow his or her instruction in order to complete the mission successfully. He finished to take a breath and looked over each student. We will now start the selection of the 3-man teams. Team 1 will be. He started the long and boring process of selecting teams. Naruto looked around at the people and instantly thought, I'm in no way being in his team. But if it's that or my shinobi career. He shook his head and continued glaring at Naiko until he heard his name called. Team 7 will be Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto's head snapped up to see who was on his team. Sasuke Uchiha. Naruto silently cheered in his head and began thinking, please don't be, but his thought was cut off by the name of the third person. Naiko Hikari. Your Junin sensei will be Kakashi Hatake. He finished looking at the 3. Naruto looked half happy half pissed. Same was said for Naiko while Sasuke was indifferent. He shook his head and continued on. A half an hour later after the team selections and a speech by Iruka, they were dismissed for lunch. Naruto walked straight to the roof to just sit there. Ian watched the clouds as he ate his lunch while he waited for them to be called back in. He leaned back and closed his eyes thinking about what he was gonna change his outfit to be. After a few minutes he heard footsteps coming towards him. Opening his eyes he saw Sasuke. His fear lowered when she didn't do anything other than sit beside him. Hello Sasuke, he said giving her a small nod in greeting. Dobi, she greeted back. After that there was a silence yay awkward silences. It was a few moments before either of them spoke, and when they did speak it was Naruto who was apologizing again. Listen, about earlier, Naiko pushed me so it's not really my fault. But I'm sorry anyway, he said closing his eyes again. It's alright, she said just watching the clouds. So we're on the same team. Mind showing me that jutsu then? Naruto raised an eyebrow and thought for a moment. Oh yay that. He put his hands in a cross seal and called out Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. A few Narutos appeared around them all waving and saying yo. Are they solid? She asked with a raised eyebrow. Yep, they all answered at once with a big grin. That's cool, I guess, she said as they all disappeared into a cloud of smoke. Sure is, Naruto exclaimed opening his eyes to watch the clouds again. I suppose I have myself some servants. He mused with small grin on his face. HN, was his response. About 10 minutes later they were called back in. Naruto sat in the back in his normal seat by Sasuke. Naiko sat with his friends till they were the only 3 left. Naruto got up and walked to the chalkboard and grabbed an eraser before going to the door and proceeding to set up his prank. Sasuke held back a smirk and Naiko just stared at the blonde. What the hell are you doing, Naruto? He said annoyed at the blonde's antics. Does it matter? He said turning to glare at the dark-haired boy. Yes, he answered. Naruto rolled his eyes. Pranking our Junin sensei, duh, he said as he looked at his work. He nodded and went back to go sit down with a big smile on his face. You know he's a Junin, right? He won't fall for that, Naiko said shaking his head. Whatever. Naruto put his chin on his hands and proceeded to watch the door. Approximately 20 minutes after that the silver-haired Junin finally made his appearance. He slid the door open and popped his head in causing the chalky eraser to fall on his head. Naruto for his part burst out laughing, Sasuke smirked and Naiko looked totally shocked and incredulous. Kakashi for his part looked somewhat amused. My first impression of you guys is. He seemed to think for a few moments. You're all annoying. Naruto face FA, ulted and you're annoying for being late. He said glaring at the Junin thinking of ways to get him back for calling him annoying. Whatever. Just meet me on the roof in a few minutes. He said shining out of there. Naruto stood up and grabbed Sasuke's wrist before going and grabbing Naiko's wrist. He then proceeded to drag them to the roof of the academy. Kakashi I smile. As he saw them appear on the roof with Naruto leading the way dragging them. He looked them over and assessed them. The blonde one looked like a loud and obnoxious idiot. The Uchiha looked arrogant, and the Hikari looked like an overachieving fanboy. Okay children, Naruto glared, we're gonna introduce ourselves by stating your name, likes, dislikes, hobbies and dreams for the future. He looked at each of them before saying, I'll start just so you know what to do. My name is Kakashi Hatake, My likes are none of your business, neither are my dislikes, my hobbies. I have lots. As for my dream. They all sweat dropped. All you really told us was your name. Naruto said. Ignoring Naruto, Kakashi pointed at Naiko. You go first. Naiko rose an eyebrow. My name is Naiko Hikari. My likes are Sasuke and training. My dislikes are Naruto and lazy, late people. My hobbies include training and being an avid fanboy. My dream for the future is to marry Sasuke. Oh wow, a fanboy. This should be fun, Kakashi thought sarcastically. He pointed to Sasuke. You next. My name is Sasuke Uchiha. My likes are training and hanging out with my friends. My dislikes are fanboys. Naiko face faulted. My hobbies are same as my likes. My dream for the future is to resurrect my clan. You next, Blondie, Kakashi said, pointing at Naruto. Naruto scowled before he spoke. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. My likes are ramen, training and my friends. I dislike Naiko and waiting the few minutes it takes the ramen to cook. My hobbies are training and pranks. My dream for the future is to become Hokage and have everyone in the village acknowledge me. I see. Well, the day after tomorrow we will start our duties, if you can pass my test, Kakashi said, not looking up from his orange book he had in his hand. What kind of test, Kakashi-sensei? Naruto asked, confused. A survival test. You see, out of the many who passed the graduation exam, only 9 go on to be actual genin from a test administered by their Junin-sensei. Every student I've had in the past failed. Hopefully you guys won't be the same, he explained, amused at the horrified faces of Naruto and Naiko. Well, that's all for now. I'll see you at the training grounds at 6 tomorrow. Oh, and before I forget, don't eat anything. Unless you like losing your breakfast, he said as he disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Naruto stood up and said, I'm eating anyways cause I can't survive on an empty stomach, he said as he walked to the edge and looked down. Well, I'm off. See ya tomorrow, Sasuke, Naiko. He jumped off. Naiko turned to Sasuke. So no, she said before walking off, causing Naiko to face fault then leave as well. Naruto stood on a building across from the ninja clothes store. Hey, this should be easy. Henji transformed into a tall dark-haired Kakashi with no face mask. Grinning like an idiot, he walked into the store and began looking through the aisles. He ended up buying a black t-shirt with a dark red Konoha swirl on it with a black cloak. Think Akatsuki, but it's not buttoned up, it's wide open and small enough to fit Naruto over it. The cloak had bits and prices of orange on it, cause Naruto wouldn't be Naruto without found some loose-fitting ninja pants and bought those too. He left and went home to change before leaving to the weapons shop. He checked Gama-chan and noted he had enough of last allowance left for a few weapons. He entered the shop in his EU apparel and nodded his greeting to the store owner before looking around. He grabbed a few packs of kunai before noticing a sword that looking like it was severely cracked. He took it up to the store owner. Is this sword broken? He asked with a raised eyebrow. No, the store owner chuckled, it's called a daggertail sword. Not a very used weapon, I'll tell you that. Naruto laughed. Ed Abbott then took another look at the sword. How does it work? You just push your chakra into the hilt there and the links come apart, turning into a very useful weapon. Go ahead and try it out. Naruto looked at the blade and pushed chakra out into it before the cracks broke apart, revealing the tail part of daggertail. Cool. How much? Naruto asked, definitely taking this weapon. 500 Ryu without the scroll, 550 with it. He answered. Naruto put down the kunai and shuriken he was buying and took out Gama-chan and put down the rest of his money, leaving only enough to buy a few bowls of ramen. Be right back, he said as he went to the back. When he came back he was holding a scabbard and scroll. The scabbard it for holding the sword while the scroll contains the katas needed to use the daggertail correctly, he explained. Naruto nodded and put the daggertail into its scabbard while walking out reading his scroll. Time to go train, he thought happily as he made his way to training ground 7. The next day, Naruto woke up laying on the grass. What? Where am I? He thought to himself as he looked at his surroundings. Oh yeah, I trained myself to exhaustion yesterday. He sat up and yawned, taking out a rations bar he didn't forget to bring in case he did end up falling asleep outside. He ate it quickly and checked the sun. It's roughly 5:30 I'd say, he thought as he stood up and unsheathed his dagger tail. He decided to name Shikage, and started practicing his katas again. Forcing chakra into the hilt, the blade became a chain of destruction as Naruto repeatedly and unmercifully gashed the training post. About a half an hour later Sasuke showed up. She looked at the person with the whipping sword and a cloak. She took out a kunai and prepared to throw it when she saw the dead give away his blonde hair. "Dobi, what are you doing?" she called out to him, causing him to jump and lose control of swing, causing the blade to miss its intended target and hit Naruto, who luckily slowed it down so it didn't pierce his skin. "Geez Sasuke, I could have gotten hurt there," he called back as he stopped his chakra flow to the blade, causing it to retract back into sword form. "Why are you dressed like that?" she asked, completely ignoring his complaint. "'Cause my old outfit screamed, I'm a target. Kill me," he answered, sheathing Shikage. He then sat down and ate another rations bar. "Did ya eat anything before coming here?" She shook her head, "Had no time." "Sure ya did." He handed her a rations bar. "If he's anything like yesterday, then he probably won't be here for a few hours." "If that's true, then why are you here so early?" she asked, looking at the mangled training post. I fell asleep here," he said sheepishly. "I see," she replied, eating her rations bar. Naruto stood back up and released the full fury of his dagger tail on the nearest tree, shattering the bark and gashing it up pretty bad. He smirked at the power of Shikage, and that power would only increase as his own does. Well, I guess we could use this time for, say, sparring," Naruto said, re-sheathing Shikage. She nodded and got into a taijutsu stance. Naruto smirked as he charged, drawing his fist back. Sasuke ducked under the NCH coming her way and shot upward, catching Naruto in the gut and lifting him off the ground. Naruto dropped on a knee holding his gut as Sasuke smirked at him. He swipe kicked her of her feet and tried to do a flipping heel kick, but she rolled out of the way before his heel could make contact. Getting up on one knee, Sasuke took out a few kunai and tossed them at Naruto, who dodged and in turn threw a few shuriken. Naiko arrived a few moments into the spar but decided not to butt in, so he just observed from afar, waiting for them to finish. This went on for about a half an hour before he too noticed Naiko and rotated to get used to each other's fighting styles. To say Naiko was surprised at Naruto's new appearance would be like saying Tsunade rarely drank. After about another hour, they finished before Kakashi finally showed up. "Yo," he said with a small wave, not looking up from his favorite perverted orange book. "You're late, Kakashi-sensei," Naruto shouted, pointing finger. He may have changed his look, but his attitude is still the same, thought Kakashi, who put away his orange book for a few minutes so he could explain the rules to the three. He took out a clock and hit the timer. "This is set for noon," he explained, taking out 2 bells. "Your task is to take these from me before the time is up. If you don't get a bell by noon, you get no lunch," he said, tying the bells to his belt. "Oh, and you won't succeed unless you come at me with the intent to kill. Now, begin." The moment the word, "begin," left his mouth, all three took off in different directions. Naruto took off to the north and pulled out a kunai. Straining his ears, he listened for the arrival of Kakashi. Hearing a slight rustling noise, Naruto threw it. Upon hearing a yelp, he opened his eyes and looked into the bush where he seemed to have hit Naiko's leg. "Whoops, sorry Naiko," he said, helping him to his feet. "I wonder how hard Kakashi will be to defeat alone." "Stay here, I'll be right back," he ordered Naiko, who rose an eyebrow but nodded. Naruto found Kakashi in the clearing reading his orange book. Taking out a kunai, Naruto slowly and quietly as he could tried to sneak up behind Kakashi. But that plan failed when he stepped on and broke a twig, causing Kakashi to spin around, throwing a kunai. Blocking it, Naruto charged his new sensei and attempted to cut him. This attempt was blocked and Naruto was kicked away. Unsheathing Shikage, Naruto swung its sword form at Kakashi, who jumped back and dodged the vicious blade. Smirking, Naruto swung again, this time adding chakra into the equation, causing the sword to take on its dagger-tail form. After a few dodges and blade redirections, Kakashi put his orange book away and started fighting back. Realizing Kakashi was just playing with him, Naruto made a few clones to keep him busy while he ran back to Naiko. I stood a fight but I realized he was just toying with me. He said thoughtfully. We need to regroup and come up with a plan of attack, he said as they went to find Sasuke. A few minutes later they found he attempting to go into the clearing to fight Kakashi. Wait Sasuke, we need a plan, Naruto loudly whispered to her, causing her to jump and glare at them. Don't freaking sneak up on me like that, she whispered back, annoyed. Maybe if you used your ninja senses, we wouldn't have been able to sneak up on you, Naruto told her smugly. Shut up Dobi, she said back. Whatever, we need a plan of action, Naruto said as he closed his eyes in thought. Okay, this is how it will start. 10 minutes later, Kakashi started giggling and the front of his mask gained a tint of red as he read a particularly perverted part of his book. Hey sensei. He looked up only to see about 20 Narutos, all with the released dagger tail, grinning maniacally. His eye widened, all the Narutos just laughed as Kakashi Elta tugging at his belt and saw Sasuke taking the bells. All the Narutos disappeared, leaving one. Well, that was sort of anticlimactic, Naiko said as Naruto let him have his bell. Well, at least it worked, Sasuke said as she sat on one of the training posts. The other two did the same. That it did, Kakashi said thoughtfully. And you used teamwork, which incidentally, was the whole point of this exercise. All three nodded as he went on. To quote my best friend, in the ninja world, those who break the rules are trash. But those who abandon their comrades are worse than that. All my past teams just followed the rules and went off to go plan themselves and came at me without the aid of their friends, causing them to fail, but you guys didn't do that. You planned together and executed the plan together. Although, you did leave Naiko out of it, he said, to which Naiko nodded. Kakashi finished, but you still used teamwork, which is why you three pass. Naruto jumped into the air from his training post shouting, Yada. Sasuke smiled and Naiko started cheering while Kakashi smiled. Thus the start of their lives as ninja. Fox. This is Raven. Do you have the target in sight? Over. A static female voice was heard through his headset. Affirmative, he replied in an equally static-filled voice. Scarecrow. Should I pursue the target? Chase him to Wolf's position. Scarecrow replied. Hi. With that, Fox, also known as Naruto, took off after the target, also known as Tora the cat. Naruto hated chasing the cat that always somehow got away from his owner, Akka the Fire Daimyo's wife. Naruto was sorely tempted to grab Shikage, but thought better of it and just chased him towards Wolf, also known as Naiko. Wolf, get ready. We are almost at your position, Naruto said over the headset. Hi, he heard Naiko's static-filled voice reply. Smirking forced Tora to turn towards Naiko's position. After a few more seconds of running after the little demon, a blur popped out from behind the tree and grabbed the cat, causing it to tear up his face. Naruto, while laughing at Naiko's expense, took Tora and tied him up before Sasuke and Kakashi came to see if they got him. He ruffled Tora's brown fur, waited. After about 2 minutes Sasuke arrived and laughed at Tora's tied-up form. Why is he tied up? She asked when she calmed down. He wouldn't stop scratching, Naiko answered, nursing the cat claw marks all over his face. At this she burst out laughing again. Grumbling, Naiko picked up the bound Tora and started walking to the Hokage tower where Kakashi said he would meet them. Sasuke, still chuckling, and Naruto followed. A few minutes passed when they arrived at the tower. They greeted Kakashi and handed him their headsets. They then climbed the tower to the Hokage's office. Hello, Hokage Ogg, Naruto called out when he walked into the office. Sass. Uke rolled her eyes at Naruto's loud mouth but greeted the third with a, hello Hokage-sama. Naiko smacked Naruto upside the head for his lack of respect but greeted the Hokage nonetheless. Kakashi just chuckled at his student's antics. Tora, was all they heard before a giant blur came and took the bound cat from them and started squeezing the life out of it. Naruto actually almost felt sorry for him. Almost. After paying the Hokage who would later pay the ninjas, Tora's owner left. Turning to the Genin and Junin, the Hokage spoke, okay, you have done enough missions for today, tomorrow's starting D-Ran. No, they heard the blonde's voice call out. I want a harder mission. Raising an eyebrow the Hokage asked, what kind of mission? I don't know, but anything is better than these chores you have us doing. Academy students, heck even villagers, could do these D ranks without problem. Naruto said, dodging another smack upside the head from Nico. Sarutobi C. Med to deliberate it for a few moments before finally agreeing to it. Fine, I'll give you a C rank escort mission. Naruto's face brightened up instantly. Really? He asked. Sarutobi nodded and called out, bring in the client. Chu Junin came in with a drunk old guy who, from the looks of it, came from Nami Wave. You four will escort him back to his village in Nami. His name is Tazuna, the Hokage explained. They nodded and the drunken man, Tazuna, looked them over. They're just kids. I bet the short one is annoying as hell. He slurred in his obviously drunken voice. Naruto again felt the urge to reach for his dagger tail, but he suppressed the feeling and instead chose to scare him. Disappearing, Naruto forced chakra into his legs and came up behind him and pressed the blade of a kunai to his throat and said, watch who you insult. They might just end you life. With wide obviously sober eyes he nodded. Naruto. Kakashi called out, you're not supposed to kill the one we're supposed to be protecting. I know. I wasn't gonna kill him. He putting away his kunai and rejoining his group. So, do you accept the mission? The Hokage asked, taking a puff from his pipe. All four nodded. All right, you will all meet at the west gate at 9:30 a.m. He said, giving them the rest of the day off. Naruto spent an hour at the ramen shop with Sasuke before they went their separate ways. Naruto went to the weapons shop to get a checkup on his dagger tail. He walked into the shop and walked up to the store owner. Hello, Naruto said, unsheathing Shikage. I need a checkup on my sword. The shop owner nodded and took the sword. A few minor cracks and a little dull, but other than that it's in great shape, he said, smiling. You're taking great care of it. I should have it fixed and resharpened within the hour. But while you wait, I want to show you something. He took Naruto taught he be. Ack room where there was a sharpener and a bunch of other weapon-making tools. Here, it's all yours, for taking such good care of the dagger tail, he said, handing him a scroll. Thanks, Naruto smiled and then looked at the scroll. It was filled with seal-less jutsu usable only with the dagger tail. A large grin spread itself across his face. There was gonna be lots of training to do tonight. When the dagger tail got back into his possession, he read the first one. Dagatoru Gijutsu. Ken Furamingu, Dagger Tail Technique, Flaming Sword. Class A. Description. This jutsu is a powerful technique. Ranked for its power and chakra consumption. When used, the links on the dagger tail become engulfed in flame and can burn through almost anything. An elemental affinity to fire is not needed but recommended. Elemental affinity? He asked, not expecting an answer, but he got one anyway. Elemental affinity is what most shinobi need to use elemental jutsu. I don't know what yours are, so don't ask. Go to the library and ask the librarian. She might have some chakra paper you can use. A voice sounded in the back of his head. Taking the fox's advice, he went to the library before it closed. The librarian was one of the people who didn't hate him and didn't kick him out right away. Hello, I was wondering if you had any chakra paper I could use. He said, tilting his head to the side a bit. With a raised eyebrow she said, sure. She went under her desk and pulled out a brown piece of paper. Here you go, all you do is channel chakra into it and it'll show you what elements you have an affinity for. He nodded and did what he was told. The paper split and both pieces exploded into flames. Wind and fire. A lethal combination, she said with a smile, holding out to wind control and fire control basic scrolls. Why are they a lethal combo? Naruto asked, taking the scrolls. 'Cause wind amplifies the power of fire. She answered. Oh, and thanks for the scrolls, he said, leaving to training ground 7. Okay, let's start this, shall we? He said as he sat by a post and opened the fire scroll. He read it Thor, Owly, and came up with a quick way to get control of his fire element. He put his hands in a cross seal and called out Tajukage Bunshin no Jutsu. About 100 clones all stood there and stared at Naruto, who explained what he wanted them to do. Then all took some leaves and 50 began trying to cut them and the other 50 tried to burn them. Smirking, he did the physical training by doing his dagger tail katas. By the time he headed home, his clones were already done fire and wind manipulation and now were doing the low-level elemental jutsu. Naruto climbed into bed after a quick dinner of instant ramen. And fell asleep. Naruto woke up with a giant headache. Apparently the clones left while he was asleep. He smiled as he went through his memories. He now knew Fuden, Daitapa 1, Fuden, Renkuden 2, Kaden, Enden 3 and Kaden, Karyu Enden 4. Yawning, he looked at the clock. He still had an hour. He got up and had a quick breakfast and took a shower before putting on his ninja outfit and leaving to try out the jutsu for himself. Oh, wow, he said when he got there. The field was totaled. There were trees bent over and burnt. There were burn spots on the ground. Oh, shit, I'm so dead, he said. But he shook his head and cleared those thoughts. Now was the time to concentrate. He went through the necessary hand seal S and called out Fuuton, Daitoppa no jutsu. The wind picked up to high speeds and started to blow trees away. He cancelled it, proud of himself for learning such a powerful jutsu. He went through another set of hand seals and called out Futon, Renkuudan no jutsu. He inhaled deeply and shot forward a bullet made completely of compressed air. He watched it glide through the air and hit a tree, leaving a hole in it. Smiling hugely, he went on to the Enden, which just about created a forest fire. Then he did the Karyu Enden, which was a pretty strong jutsu. He, again, just about started a forest fire using it. After checking out his new jutsu, he went home and saw he still had 45 minutes left. So he went back to the training field and decided to learn that dagger tail jutsu. When he got to the training field, he unsheathed his dagger tail and read the jutsu's instructions. A few moments had passed when he began the technique. By focusing fire chakra into the the links should spark and catch on fire. He began channeling fire chakra, causing the blade to turn into the dagger tail and the runes along the blade to glow and begin sparking. Dagateru Gi, Jutsu. Ken Furamingu, he said, and the runes all let out a big spark, but the blades didn't catch on fire. Damn, maybe I didn't channel enough chakra, he thought out loud. He practiced the technique for the next 30 minutes before all the links caught flame. Yes, I did it, he shouted as he jumped around with a still flaming dagger tail. Ow, he yelled out as one of the links UGHT his side while he was jumping with joy. He laughed sheepishly as he extinguished the flames and left to the western gate to wait out the last 15 minutes. A few minutes later, Sasuke came walking, looking at Naruto strangely. Naruto, why is there soot around your mouth? There is, he asked, feeling his face. He looked at his hand and sure enough there was faint black soot on his hand. He rubbed his head sheepishly as he replied, I was using fire ninjutsu. You can use fire ninjutsu? She asked, slightly amazed. Yep, he replied, wiping away the rest of the soot. Kakashi and Naiko appeared at the same time. Now we wait a few minutes for the client to get here, Kakashi told them. Naruto looked at the trees surrounding the village. I could come out here and use a clearing as a private training ground, he thought to himself with a slight smile. Here he is. A voice called Naruto's attention back to his team. About time, Naiko said with his eyes closed. Hey guys, Chizuna called out, actually sober. Ready guys, Kakashi said, with an eye smile. Yep, they all said in unison. With that they set out. They walked for a few hours before taking a break, in which time Naruto took to practice his low-level Dagateru Gijutsu, Ken Furamingu. At such a low level the blades only glow while giving off heat that would start a fire if left on a surface for too long. He slashed at a tree, leaving singe marks. A half an hour later, they set off again, Naruto pretty much leading them all. Night fell and Naruto took first watch. Making clones, he sent them into the immediate area to scout, while he went to find a clearing to practice. He took out his dagger tail and made a clone to spar with. After a few minutes of back and forth striking with the dagger tails, he finally slashed the clone across the chest, every blade link hitting it before it dispelled. He felt the slash through the clone's memories, and boy did he not want that to happen to him. Quite the vicious attack, don't you think, Guzu? A mocking voice rang out through the clearing. Yes indeed, Maizu. A second mocking voice rang out. Come out, Naruto shouted, pulling out a kunai. Duck, you fool, the demon told him, which he did without hesitation. It was then he noticed the chain that would have wrapped around him. You see, to be one of the ninja escorting the fool Tazuna back to wave, the voice of Guzu said from behind him. He turned and stared at the Kiri nin. He appeared to be about 25. He had long brown hair and a Kiri Hitai with a spike over it. He wore a mask over the bottom his face with two valve things. He wore a cloak like Naruto's, but his didn't open. He also had a clawed gauntlet with a chain coming out a hole on the cuff part. He followed the chain and saw someone on the other side who had the same gauntlet on the opposite hand. His Hitai wad two horn-like things coming from it. His hair was just like Guzu's but more scruffy. He also wore a mask over the bottom of his face with one valve thing. He wore a dark camouflage t-shirt with a brown sleeveless over it. Naruto made a clone, one watching Mizu and him watching Guzu. The chain suddenly tightened and the demon brothers started to circle Naruto and his clone. Naruto ducked under the chain that, he was pretty sure, could tear him up. However, the clone wasn't so lucky and he proved that Naruto would have died if he got caught in the chain. What's your name, Blondie? Asked Mizu. Why should I tell you? Naruto asked, dodging a few kunai. We would like to know the name of the person we're gonna kill. Guzu said with an unseen smirk. Who said I'm the one going to die? He asked, jumping over the chain that was going for his feet. Us, obviously, Mizu said in a bored tone of voice. Naruto growled and closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them, everything was tinted red and the demon brothers both had a blue aura around them. The hell, this again, he whispered to himself as the two seemed to move slower. Flashback. 7-year-old Naruto was running through an alley, only to find a mob come to the other end. Damn, he cursed as he looked behind him. Suddenly, everything took on a red hue as the villagers closed in on him. What? He said as he looked around with his now level 1 Sharingan. He saw an opening and took off, finding another place to hide. He watched as the red hue faded and everything was normal. What was that? He quietly asked himself before heading to his apartment. End flashback. Naruto thought back to that day as the first time he remembered seeing this red hue and he still didn't know what it was. He dodged a few slower moving kunai and went through hand seals and called out Fuuton. Renkuudan no jutsu. He inhaled deeply and shot out the bullet of compressed air at the one known as Mizu, who took the blast to the chest, knocking him back. That was window enough for Naruto to run through more hand seals and call out Kaden, Karyuu and no jutsu, and incinerated the place where Mizu was. Naruto smirked as the memories of a clone who saw the battle come back to him. It seems the clone informed Kakashi of the situation. The smirk, however, was short-lived because the place where Mizu was supposed to be laying was a puddle. Damn, Mizu Bunshin, he said, turning around to see the real Mizu standing beside Guzu. When they saw his eyes, theirs widened fractionally. Naruto grabbed hold of his dagger tail and initiated Dagateru Gijutsu, Ken Furamingu. He pulled back and started a relentless barrage of attacks on them, which they just ended up dodging. They connected their chain again and tried to tie it around Naruto. But what they didn't know was that the Dagateru Gijutsu, Ken Furamingu, could burn through almost anything. And it did, it cut right through their chain. Surprised, they jumped back and looked at each other and back at Naruto, who was running through hand seals like there was no tomorrow. Fuuton. Daitoppa no jutsu. The WIND picked up and sent them flying into some trees. Wincing, they stood back up and stared at Naruto, who was panting. They were about to rush the panting figure when a hand fell on their shoulders. Slowly, they turned around only to see the masked figure of Kakashi, who proceeded to knock the two Kiri Chunin out and tie them up while Naruto sat and caught his breath. The red tint still wasn't gone. Good job, Naruto, he said, looking into the blonde's eyes. What? Naruto said questioningly. That's the Sharingan, he said softly, but Naruto still heard. Sharingan, he asked. What's that? A dojutsu used by the Uchiha clan. But, how did you get them? Kakashi asked, and the boy's eyes widened. Me, I don't have the Sharingan. I'm not an Uchiha, Naruto said, looking for something to see his reflection. And it's already at its second level, Kakashi said thoughtfully. Naruto pulled out his sword and gazed at his reflection. Sure enough, the irises were red and each eye held 2 tomo. The Sharingan, Naruto said softly, touching under his left eye. I have the Sharingan too, Kakashi said, taking Naruto's attention from his reflection. He picked up his Hitai-8 that covered his left eye and Naruto was gazing into Kakashi's level 3 Sharingan. But since you're not Uchiha, you shouldn't be able to deactivate it, Kakashi said. Naruto scowled and said, maybe it has something to do with that stupid fox, he said, hearing a growl from the back of his mind. Maybe, Kakashi said thoughtfully. Anyway, stop the chakra flow from your eyes. That should deactivate it. Naruto did what he was told and the red hue faded away. We should go back and rest now. I'll take the rest of the night watch, Kakashi sighed, leading the tired blonde back to the camp where he entered his tent and fell asleep. Naruto was sitting against a wall trying to catch his breath. He had just played a prank on a group of inebriated people. He had set up a chain reaction so when they were leaving the bar they would trip a wire, causing a barrage of water balloons to fall on them. Despite their obvious drunkenness, they had noticed Naruto chuckling in the bush and had chased him. Fortunately for him, they were drunk and pretty slow. Unfortunately for him, he was 6 and also not very fast. He sat there panting, still laughing about his prank, when suddenly he heard a drunken shout from his right. He turned to look at the soaked, drunk man who called out to his friends. I found him, found the demon. He slurred and turned to look at Naruto, who had conveniently, for them, chosen to hide in a dead end. The other came running and stared upon the small child who was shivering in fear. Some begged, and advancing upon the small fear-filled child, while others looked a bit hesitant. What if we get caught? One asked. Don't worry, we won't. We just gonna rough him up a bit anyway so no one should care, the leader said, smirking darkly. That got the others over their hesitance and they began to advance upon the small 6-year-old. But, before they could reach him, a figure appeared between them and Naruto. Leave the child alone, he spoke in a teenager's voice. Naruto looked up to see a person wearing Anbu armor glaring at the group of 5 drunken men. But Abnu saw one started, but he was cut off by the teen. I said leave, now, he ordered, and the men started stuttering out apologies and took off. He turned to Naruto and knelt down to eye level and asked, are you alright? I am fine, Mr. Anbu-san, Naruto said quietly, tracing the markings on the weasel-esque mask with his eyes. Good, the teen said, standing to walk away when Naruto jumped up and said, wait. Yes, the Anbu said, turning his head slightly. Can I have your name? He asked with a large grin on his face. Weasel, answered. Okay, thanks for saving me, Weasel-san, Naruto said with his grin widening fractionally. The teen nodded to Naruto before stepping out onto the street and disappearing, leaving Naruto to walk to his brand new apartment. A week Naruto sat on the swing at the academy. They had just let out and the parents and older siblings were picking up their kids' brothers, sisters. Naruto sighed sadly. No one was gonna be coming to pick him up today. He pumped his legs a little and started swinging. He slowed to a stop when he heard a feminine voice talk to him. What are you doing, Dobi? He turned to look at the owner of the voice and found it belonged to the only Uchiha in his class. I'm swinging Sasuke Tem, he answered with a large grin. Sasuke, a familiar voice called out. They both turned to the voice and saw Itachi Uchiha standing there with a soft expression on his face. Itachi ni, Sasuke greeted, with a smile. Naruto stared at him for a few moments, then, Weasel-san, he said, grinning widely. Yes, Itachi acknowledged, turning his black eyes to Naruto, who still had a grin that was threatening to split his face open. Really, I was guessing, Naruto said, snickering. Itachi face faulted. He got my identity spot on. He'll make a good ninja someday, he thought to himself. A week later, Naruto was holding his hands in a tiger seal, trying to gather chakra. But failing miserably, Itachi appeared in full ABNU gear staring at Naruto. Was that you? What do ya mean? Asked a surprised Naruto. There was an influx of an unfamiliar chakra signature here in the training field, so I came to investigate, he stated. Huh? Naruto asked dumbly. There was a burst of unfamiliar chakra here, so I came to see what it was. Oh, maybe it was me, Naruto said. I don't know how to control my chakra. Chakra, Itachi corrected. You said chakra. The correct term is chakra. Itachi explained. Oh, okay. I don't know how to control my chakra when everyone else knows the basics, Naruto complained. Itachi stared for a moment. I'll help out a bit, he said, his ever stoic expression unchanging. Yada. Naruto jumped in the air in excitement. Itachi watched him jump up and down for a few seconds before stopping him. Stop and listen. Naruto quickly stopped jumping and gave his undivided attention to Itachi. Now do exactly as I say. Put your hands in a ram seal. He showed Naruto the hand seal, which Naruto mimicked. Now close your eyes and feel inside yourself. Naruto did as commanded and tried to feel inside himself. He finally got it after 10 minutes. It feels like warmth flowing through paths to the center of my body. Itachi nodded. Good, that's what it should feel like. Now try to move the warm feeling around your body. Naruto tried as suggested and found it harder than he expected. But he eventually got a hang of it. I got it, he stated excitedly. Good, that should be where everyone is at this moment in class. Itachi said. Hey, Itachi-ni, can you teach me something cool? Naruto asked. Itachi raised an eyebrow. Itachi-ni. He asked. Yay, I heard Sasuke say your name, and you acted more like a brother to me than anyone else in the village. So, you're Itachi-ni. Naruto explained. Alright, I'll teach you something that should be useful when the villagers start getting rowdy. He said as he thought for a moment. Get that warm feeling back and push it to your legs and feet. Naruto nodded and did as he was told. Soon his legs started feeling stronger. Now run. He took off as fast as he could and found he could almost as fast as a fresh genin. Thank you Itachi-ni-san. He yelled as he ran around. No problem, Naruto-kun. You should probably get home now, it's getting late. Itachi said as the small blonde started slowing down due to too much chakra usage. He panted as he came to a stop. Bye Itachi-ni. Bye Naruto-kun, he replied, disappearing, via Shunshin. A month later, he had been around town all afternoon looking for a shop that would sell him some water balloons and paint. When he finally did find one that charged him triple the regular price. He didn't care though, as long as he got to complete this prank he didn't care. He filled one of the balloons with a multitude of colors before he snuck to the main branch's house door. He tied the balloon to some ninja wire he had and took a shuriken and found a bush to hide behind. He waited, and waited, and waited, and waited. Damn, where are all the HYUUG? Wait, someone's coming. He smirked as he got ready to throw it. As soon as the figure was outside the door, Naruto flung the shuriken, cutting the ninja wire, dropping the balloon on Hiyashi Hyuga's head. Bursting out laughing at the now colorful Hyuga, he failed to notice that he was coming at him till he was just a few feet away. Oh shit. Naruto cheesed it out of there as fast as he could, stopping in front of the Uchiha compound to catch his breath, but before he left he heard a female scream. Being the knucklehead he is, he rushed in to help. He came to the main house and went inside. He walked around and saw Sasuke. She seemed to be holding her head in pain. Naruto rushed to her side and tried to help, but when he looked up he was horrified. Blood. There was lots of blood and the dead bodies of Sasuke's parents. Who did this? He whispered to himself, and as if answering his question, Itachi's voice carried from over to the side of the room. Hello, Naruto-kun, he said in an emotionless voice. Itachi, did you do this? He stuttered out. The older Uchiha looked at Naruto and a strange smirk crossed his face as he nodded. Naruto's resolve hardened when he nodded. He stood up and, like the idiot he is, charged Itachi, getting knocked to the side. Naruto sat back up and rushed him again, only to be knocked away again. You're too weak to fight me now, but, I'll tell you what. I'll give you a little gift for your courage, Itachi said, walking up to Naruto and proceeded to knock him out. The last thing he heard before everything went black was, don't make me regret giving you this gift, Naruto-kun. Naruto's eyes penned to see the side of the tent he was sleeping in. He sighed. He recognized his dreams as his memories of his times with Itachi. His only question was, why was he remembering him? A voice sound off in his head. It's a side effect from realizing you had the Sharingan. Naruto nodded. Then a thought struck him. why are you listening to my thoughts? They're kind of hard to ignore when it feels like you're broadcasting them to me," was his answer. Naruto sighed. Whatever. He got up and got dressed. Leaving the tent, he noticed the only other one awake was Kakashi, who looked well rested, despite staying up all night. "Morning, Kaka-sensei," Naruto greeted. "Morning, Naruto," was his reply. "Do you know what time it is?" he asked drowsily. "It's about 6 o'clock, Kakashi answered. "'Kay, thanks," Naruto replied, digging in his pack for something to eat. He finally pulled out 2 ration bars and an apple. Grimacing, Naruto ate the ration bars first, then to tea. Ate the unpleasant taste out of his mouth, he ate the apple. Getting a little tired of the silence, Naruto decided to break it. "So Kaka-sensei, what's up?" Kakashi turned to look at the blonde and gave an eye smile. "Not much. A little tired, but that's about it. You?" I'm pretty good. Had a weird dream though," he admitted. "Really? What about?" Kakashi asked. "Itachi. Or rather, my memories of him. Mean and furry thinks it's cause of my realization that I have the Sharingan. My subconscious was reminding me of where I got it." Kakashi chuckled at the nickname while Kyuubi growled, causing Naruto to laugh as well. "That could most likely be the case, Naruto," Kakashi said. "We should probably wake the others now for breakfast, after that we'll head out." Naruto nodded and went Nico's tent. He unzipped it and stuck his hand in and grabbed the unsuspecting person by the ankle and dragged him out of the tent, sputtering the whole way. "Damn it, Naruto, what the hell was that about?" he yelled at the laughing blonde. "Kakashi-sensei said to wake you up," he replied. "Now go and get ready." He smirked while going to Sasuke's tent. He unzipped it and kneeled and stared at her face. He immediately felt a flutter in his chest, and scowled. He knew he was attracted to her, but he held himself back, thinking she didn't return his feelings. He shed down his rising feelings and lightly shook her shoulder. "Wake up, Sasuke," he said softly. She sighed sleepily and opened her eyes, only to see the whiskered face of her affections. Ignoring the flutter in her chest, she greeted the blonde. "Morning, Naruto." Giving a large grin, he replied, "Morning, Sasuke. Kakashi-sensei said it's time to wake up so we can get on our way." With a nod, she shooed him away so she could get ready. Naruto saw Nico, who was watching the flames as they cooked breakfast. Naruto came up behind him and flicked him in the back of the head. A vein instantly appeared on his forehead, which prompted Naruto to do it again, causing said vein to grow. Naruto was about to do it again when he received an elbow to the gut, courtesy of a fuming Nico. Naruto kneeled over, holding his stomach. He muttered, stalking away to take down his tent. "Breakfast is done." Despite having already eaten, Naruto had a plate in his hands, chowing down on whatever Kakashi had cooked. After they all had cleaned up and put the fire out, Kakashi started talking. "Before we go any further, I need to ask the client a few questions," causing aforementioned client to pale. What do you need?" Chizuna asked, stuttering. "Last night while my student here," he pointed at Naruto, "was attacked by 2 Chunin level missing nins here." Sasuke gasped and Nico looked at Naruto, who didn't look like he went through a scuffle with 2 Chunins. "He did brilliantly against them, but when I got there I could tell he was getting tired. So he was lucky I got there when I did." Kakashi eyes smiled at Naruto, then turned back to Chizuna with a serious face. "So my question is, why are there ninja beings sent after you?" Chizuna started sweating. "I don't know," he tried weakly. "Don't lie. Naruto could have been killed cause you lied about the mission rank. Now explain why you lied about the mission or we will drop it, for we have every right to do so." Chizuna sighed. "Okay, I'll tell you. It's cause the bridge I'm building that leads to the mainland. If I finish it we will be able to bring more exports into the mainland and sell them, effectively bringing more money into Nami. But a man named Gato doesn't want that to happen cause he took over Nami and is bleeding it dry of all its money and forcing us to live in poverty. If this bridge is built he will lose control over Nami and we could prosper again. So he sent assassins after me, to make sure I don't finish the bridge." Gato. Oh, you mean Gato of Gato Shipping?" Nico asked. Chizuna turned to him and nodded. "Yes, him. But he just uses the company as a front for his much more shadier activities, such as drug dealing and smuggling. He sounds like a greedy Tem." Naruto added his piece. He is. That's why I need your help. Please don't drop the mission. If not for me, do it for the people of Nami. Tazuna pleaded. Kakashi turned to his students. Naruto, with a determined glint in his eye, nodded. Naiko smirked and nodded. Sasuke looked a little hesitant, but in the end gave the famous Uchiha smirk and nodded. The children have spoken. We shall continue the mission. Kakashi announced. Tazuna began crying happy joyful tears. We should get going now, Kaka-sensei. Naruto said as he began walking. You're right, Naruto. We should get going. He walked ahead of Naruto and gave them the signal to surround Tazuna in a diamond formation. A few hours later they stopped at a dock where a rowboat was waiting for them. The rower motioned for them to climb aboard. When they did, he began rowing his way across the lake. The mist began to thicken as they got closer to land. Around the half point, Naruto looked up and noticed a half-complete bridge. Wow! Naruto exclaimed quietly. What? Naiko and Sasuke asked at the same time. To which Naruto just pointed up. The two of them mirrored Naruto's earlier exclamation of awe. Tazuna puffed his chest out proudly. This is that super bridge I told you about on our way here. That's nice, Kakashi said, uninterestedly. Tazuna's face faltered and had anime tears running down his face. Be quiet, you guys, around here Gato's men patrol. The rower warned. The group nodded and stopped talking. A few minutes later they hit dry land. They thanked the man who rowed the boat and left. They had walked a mile in before Naiko suddenly threw a kunai into the bushes. Kakashi's acute ears heard a barely audible pop. Naruto went and checked the bushes. Holding a kunai of his own in a reverse grip. Moving away the bushes he saw a small white rabbit, looking scared out of his wits. Naiko, you almost hurt this poor rabbit. Naruto said angrily to the dark-haired kid. I didn't mean to. Neither of them saw the calculating look in Sasuke's or Kakashi's eyes. That rabbit is white. It's not winter, so it must be domestic. And as such, kept for a substitution. Were their thoughts. It also explained that, pop, Kakashi heard. Naruto and Naiko rejoined the group and were about to start Wa El King again when Kakashi heard a sound that indicated a heavy blade was thrown at them. Guys, get down, he shouted and pulled Tazuna down with him. An overly large Zambuto buried itself into the trunk of a tree. A figure appeared standing on the hilt. He looked about 183 centimeters tall and appeared to be in his mid-late 20s. With brown slightly spiked hair, a slashed kiri headband facing towards his left. He wore no shirt and cameo-colored arm covers. Gray pants with black strips and boots the same color as his arm covers. Kakashi spoke first. Momochi Zabuza, A-rank Nuke Nin. Defected from Kiri after a failed attempt on the Mizukage's life. Zabuza raised a non-existent eyebrow. It seems you know your Nuke Nin, Sharingan no Kakashi. Junin of Konoha, said to have copied 1,000 techniques. Sharingan no Kakashi. What does he mean? Kakashi can't have the Sharingan, it's exclusive to only the Uchiha clan, were Sasuke's thoughts. Ah, and some fresh genin are here as well. You should run away. We wouldn't want you getting hurt now, would we? He let loose a concentrated blast K. The genin started shivering and sweating. Naiko reached into his kunai pouch and brought it up to his neck. Before Naruto grabbed his wrist and Kakashi said, calm down, I won't let my comrades die. Naiko nodded and brought the kunai away from his neck. Zabuza laughed. And how are you gonna do that? Mizu Bunshin surrounded them, when there are more of me than there are of you. Kakashi grabbed the covering over his eye and pulled it upwards, revealing a fully matured Sharingan. Sasuke gasped slightly. So that's what he meant by Sharingan no Kakashi. But how does he have it? He's not an Uchiha. Single quote. Naruto, I know you wanted to keep it a secret. But, you seriously need it for this fight. Kakashi told him. Naruto glanced at Sasuke, then sighed in resignation. He closed his eyes and let his chakra flow into them. Feeling a shifty feeling in them, he knew they were in their Sharingan state. What are you talking about, Kakashi? What is that kid hiding? A Zabuza clone asked curiously. Naruto opened his eyes to reveal to his team and Zabuza blood-red eyes with 2 tomo each. Naiko and Sasuke gasped while Zabuza laughed. Haha, another user of that damned eye. Still, you don't seem like much of a threat. Don't underestimate me, he shouted at the clones. Meanwhile, Sasuke felt a pull on her mind as a repressed memory presented itself. Flashback. Sasuke watched as Naruto charged her older brother, Itachi, and get knocked away, twice. She winced each time she heard him hit the ground. Suddenly, Itachi's voice reached her. You're too weak to fight me now, but I'll tell you what. I'll give you a little gift for your courage. She looked up and saw Itachi kneeling by Naruto's unconscious body, exchanging one of the body's activated Sharingan eyes and implanting them in Naruto's empty sockets. What are you doing? She asked weakly. He looked at her when he was done. Suddenly he disappeared and she was held up against the wall. You will forget what you just saw me do to Naruto. He told her. Bu. Tsukuyomi. She screamed as she witnessed her clan's demise, repeatedly. End flashback. Made me, was the first thing she heard as she came out of her trance-like state. The clones just laughed and taunted the blonde, or else what? Naruto's breathing started to get deeper as he attempted to control his anger, and if you looked close enough at his yes, you could see his pupils were pointed at the top and bottom, while not being slits but not quite circles either. The real Zabuza jumped off his perch and pulled his sword out of the tree. Naruto pulled out two kunai and held them in a reverse grip and glared at the closest clone. Zabuza disappeared and reappeared standing on top of the water. He went through a few hand seals and called out, Kurigakur no Jutsu. Even at the speed he went through the seals, Naruto caught every one of them and saw how much chakra that jutsu needed to have molded. Looking through his memories of his Kekkei Genkai, he remembered that it was useful for copying nin general and taijutsu with the exception of Kekkei Genkai ninjutsu. Naruto was brought out of his musings when a heavy mist rolled in. Zabuza's voice sounded like it was coming from everywhere at once when he spoke. I am a master at silent killing techniques. He announced, there are 8 vital points on your bodies: larynx, spine, lungs, liver, jugular vein, collarbone, kidney and heart. And being a master at silent killing techniques mean I can hit any one of these and you wouldn't even know it till you were dead. Naruto and the other genin all gulped. Naruto took a deep breath and went through hand seals and called out Fuden, Daidappa no Jutsu. He brought his up to his mouth and blew the clones along with the mist away. Zabuza growled as he made more clones and ordered them to attack the genin, while he engaged Kakashi. The clones surrounded the genin and client and picked up their Zambudo and was about to swing downward when they received a kunai to the stomach courtesy of an angry red-eyed genin. They burst into water. Naruto was about to run and help Kakashi when more clones burst from the tree lines. Sasuke and Naiko charged the 2 clones and took them down with some difficulty. Naruto created a few shadow clones and had them surround Tazuna and protect him. He turned to watch Kakashi's fight and saw Zabuza, using his sword as a support, kick Kakashi into the water. He went through more hand seals, which Naruto saw, and called out, Suoro no Jutsu, a large ball of tear enveloped Kakashi in one of Zabuza's hands. Zabuza smirked behind his mask and created a few clones with 3x more strength than the previous ones. The clones began stalking towards them, talking in unison. You weak children call yourself ninja. He stared but was interrupted by, surprisingly, Naiko, who let his anger at being called weak take hold. He charged at a clone who just kicked him in the head, making his Hitai-8 fly off. The clone stomped on it. You're about 10 years too early to be calling yourselves that. Come back once you've actually killed someone. They said simultaneously. Would you like to know why I'm called Demon of the Mist? They asked. Nobody spoke, so they continued. When I was your age, the genin exam in Kiri was different. They gave you a partner who becomes something of a brother or sister. Then when the exam came, you were ordered to kill you, brother. But me, I didn't stop there. I kept going, and eventually killed my entire class. Sasuke and Naiko gasped. Naruto remained silent, for he was having a conversation with a certain demon. Kid, you need my chakra if you're going to beat him. But, no buts, this is a life or death situation, Gaki. And I'd rather not die. Naruto remained silent for a few seconds. How much chakra can my body handle without going berserker? Just under a tael's worth. That one. Be enough to kill him, but it should seriously incapacitate him for at least a week while you get used to being able to handle more of my chakra. Naruto mentally nodded and gave the go-ahead. He felt the foreign chakra invade his pathways before exploding outwards. Naruto opened his eyes. to show his two-tomoed Sharingan with slits for pupils. All the ninjas stared in shock at Naruto, who was enveloped in a red chakra flame-like aura, his whisker marks deepening and his fingernails growing into claws, his canines lengthening into fangs. As the seal weakening, was Kakashi's RST thought before he thought. I gotta get the hell out of this thing, my air supply is almost gone. So much power, the two genin thought. What is this kid? Were Zabuza's thoughts. Naruto heard the Kyuubi's voice instructing him on what to do. He pulled his arm in and swung it outwards, sending a blast of concentrated chakra through the clones, destroying them. He crouched forward, a ND shot towards the real Zabuza, whose eyes widened. He pulled his hand out of the prison to run, but before he could take a step he was tackled. They broke apart and started rolling. Naruto caught himself first. He stood up and made a fist and charged the groaning Zabuza, who was up on one knee. The punch took all the air out of his lungs and he could have sworn he felt 3 ribs break. Zabuza flashed through hand seals with Naruto following. Zabuza called out the name of the jutsu with Naruto 1 millisecond behind him. Suiruden no Jutsu. A normal water dragon breached the lake's surface with a red-colored one right behind it. They smashed into each other, the red one breaking the normal one and continuing on Tien Zabuza. Zabuza mostly dodged but got his arm caught by the red dragon, numbing it to the point of uselessness. Naruto took a few steps forward, ready to strike again, when suddenly two Senbon hit Zabuza's neck. Kakashi went to check the body and found no pulse, confirming death to the client and his students. Suddenly a Kiri hunter nin appeared standing by the body. Thank you for weakening the target for me. They spoke with a feminine voice. No problem, Kakashi said to the hunter nin. The unknown hunter nin picked up Zabuza's dead body and disappeared. Naruto's eyes narrowed. That guy seemed suspicious. He felt the Kyuubi's chakra leave his system. He suddenly felt very heavy. He closed his eyes and fell into oblivion. Kakashi watched Naruto as he fell. He went and threw him over his shoulder and asked Tazuna, "Is your home close?" "Yea, just another few miles from here," he replied. "Good, lead the way then," he said with an eye smile. With that the four of them began walking while Naruto slept a dreamless sleep. Naruto groaned as he rolled onto his side and opened his eyes. Upon seeing an unfamiliar surrounding, he shot out of bed, grabbing his head from the sudden dizziness that accompanies sitting up too fast. He looked around and noticed he wasn't alone. Leaning against the wall was a terribly amused Kakashi Hatake. "What's so funny?" Naruto asked irritably. "Nothing," Kakashi said innocently, with an eye smile for added effect. "Whatever," Naruto grumbled. "Where are the others?" "Outside somewhere doing their own thing," Kakashi replied. Naruto nodded and looked thoughtful for a second. "I assume we're at Tazuna's house?" Naruto asked. Kakashi nodded, and looked thoughtful. "I'll be right back, I need to go get Naiko and Sasuke." Naruto nodded and laid back on his futon as Kakashi walked out of the room. Sasuke and Naiko were sparring when they saw Kakashi walking up to them. They panted as they stopped and waited for the scarecrow to reach them. Kakashi stopped a few feet away and said, "Naruto's awake now. I have something to speak to you three about." They nodded, and followed. Sasuke ignored the pang of joy he felt when Kakashi had told them Naruto was awake. Naruto was sitting at the table drinking a cup of tea when they walked in. Naruto gave them a large smile grin as they sat on either side of him, while Kakashi stayed standing. Just then a slightly drunk Tazuna waltzed in and sat at the table, looking slightly exhausted. "Hard day at the bridge?" Kakashi asked. Tazuna just nodded. "What do you need to talk to us about, Kakashi-sensei?" Naiko asked. Sasuke and Naruto just nodded, wanting to know as well. "Well, I'll just get straight to the point. I believe that Zabuza is alive," he informed them. "What?" 3 of the 4 shouted. Naruto was the only one silent, as he was remembering that suspicious hunter nin. Kakashi nodded. "Yep, he's still alive all right. That hunter nin wasn't a real hunter nin. Real hunter nin take only the head back to the village, then burn the body to preserve their village's secrets." Another hint that Zabuza is possibly still alive is that the hunter nin was using Senbon. Originally, Senbon were used for acupuncture. But, if you know the body's anatomy, then you could use them to kill a person or put a person into a near-death state. Naruto slowly nodded. I thought something was suspicious about that hunter nin just before I passed out. So what are we gonna do now? Naiko asked, a hint of nervousness in his voice. We train, Kakashi replied. Kakashi lead them into the woods, stopped in a clearing. He turned to them and spoke. Today, we're gonna learn to climb trees. Naiko looked like he was about to say something but was cut off. Without using our hands. The genin nodded. What you do is focus chakra into your feet and try to walk up the tree. Too much and you'll break the bark, not enough and you'll fall off. Now, why we're doing this is to increase your chakra control so I can teach you some jutsu without you all wasting a shitload of chakra. They nodded and Kakashi handed each of them a kunai. Mark your progress with these. It's best if you take a running start. Naruto, I take it you know how the cage bunshin work. Naruto nodded. Good, use them. Another nod was his reply. He walked out of the clearing to go guard the workers on the bridge. Naruto looked at the closest tree and took an experimental run at it, taking a few steps up it before the bark exploded. He put his hands in a cross seal and called out, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 10 clones appeared and looked at Naruto, who told them what their job was. They all ran into separate areas and began running up the trees using chakra. Naruto, Naiko and Sasuke joined them. After about a half an hour, Naiko broke the silence with a question, what's so special about the Kage Bunshin? Naruto glanced at him as he sliced at the halfway mark on his tree. He did a backflip on his way down, landing in a crouch. He answered, Kage Bunshin is a jutsu used for information gathering cause of a unique ability it has. That ability is whenever a bunshin dispels, all the information it gathered in its relatively short life is sent to the user of the jutsu. This can also be used for training purposes. Cow. Say if you make 10 bunshin and train for an hour and then dispel them, you have roughly 11 hours that training done if you also participate. It can be used for anything that doesn't have to do with physical strength. Cause if it could increase physical strength, all wounds received would transfer to the user, and should it be a fatal wound, he would die. They both nodded. Damn, that's a useful jutsu. Naiko commented. Naruto nodded. Yay, but to train with them you would need a lot of chakra. Cause of the drain to create so many would leave some people nearly dry. But I don't have that problem cause I have a lot of chakra, he said with a large grin on his face. Naiko wanted to see how much Naruto would improve if he added an extra half hour, so he threw a kunai at one of the clones when Naruto was about to run up the tree. He watched as Naruto ran a foot over his best mark. He landed and glared at Naiko. They're not ready to be dispelled yet, he growled at the dark-haired boy. Sorry, he replied meekly, and began running up and down the trees again. I'm gonna skip to the next day, and they all stayed out half the night till they finished the exercise. Closing parenthesis. The next day, the group of 4 ninjas stood in a clearing, Kakashi facing his 3 pupils, put his hand in his pouch and pulled out 3 gray almost white slips of paper, which Naruto vaguely remembered as chakra paper. Sensei, what are those? Naiko asked. These are called chakra paper. Made from chakra-infused trees. They're made so a shinobi can find out what his elements are. One of mine is lightning. Naiko and Sasuke nodded. Naruto didn't say anything. He wanted them to be amazed when they found out he had 2 elements already, and one of them was rare in Konoha. The stew. Dents nodded again as Kakashi handed out the little pieces of paper. Okay, what I want you to do is pump some chakra through your hand and into the paper. I'll tell you what element you have when everybody is done. Kakashi took Naruto off to the side and spoke to him. I know you already did this before. So what I want out to do is see if you can mix the other chakra with your own. And then pump it into the card. He explained. Naruto didn't question him, he just did as asked. He concentrated as he felt his inner warmth start to mix with a small portion of the fox's chakra. The result was a purple glow to his right hand and his right eye was slitted. Naruto rejoined the group as Kakashi was telling them that Sasuke had lighting and fire and Naiko had earth. They all turned to Naruto. The genin were startled when they saw Naruto's eye, but they calmed down a bit when he gave them a large grin. Your turn, Naruto, Kakashi told him. Naruto nodded and pushed his purple chakra into the little slip PF paper, making it slit down the middle and one side crumpled up and the other side burst into blue flame. The fire is blue cause it's Naruto's and Kyuubi's fire nature combined plus some of Naruto's wind nature. Closing parenthesis. Everyone looked down at the paper in shock, including Naruto. He hadn't expected his fire affinity to be strengthened to such an extent, and he hadn't expected to gain another element. Mentally thanking the fox for making him look more awesome in front of his team, he looked towards Kakashi to see what he had to say. Kakashi was speechless. Looking at Naruto in shock, he said, wind, lightning, and a really high affinity for fire. Amazing. Naiko and Sasuke's looked like a couple of beached fish. Naruto broke out of his shock and whooped. Sporting his abnormally large grin, he looked at Kakashi and waited for him to break out of his shock and continue the lesson. Kakashi looked at Naruto for a few seconds before noticing he had an expectant look on his face. Shaking his head, he looked at his other two students and snapped them out of their shock by clapping in their faces. They glanced at Naruto one last time before focusing back on Kakashi, who continued the lesson. Now that we know your elements, which are earth for Naiko, fire and lighting for Sasuke, and fire, wind, and lightning for Naruto, we can get on with the next part of our training, which is ninjutsu. I'll need a list of the current ninjutsu you can do. The students nodded, and on a black piece of paper Kakashi gave them listed their jutsus. Okay, let's see here. Naiko, Kawarimi, Bunshin, and Henge. Meh, good enough for an academy student, but now you're a genin, you need a more extensive list of techniques. Sasuke, Kawarimi, Bunshin, Henge, Kaden, Gukaku, and Kaden, Ryuka. That's a pretty impressive list you have there. And Naruto, Kawarimi, Henge, Kage, Bunshin, Fuden, Daitapa, Fuden, Renkuden, Kaden, Enden Kaden, Karyu Enden, Kurigakure no Jutsu, and Suiryuden. I'm assuming the last were copied from last night's fight. Getting a nod, he continued, I want you to master those two for your ninjutsu training. Okay, Kakashi-sensei. Naruto agreed. Kakashi beckoned his other two students away as he sent Naruto off to master his two new techniques. Walking through the forest, he stopped at the edge of the lake. Bringing his hands up into a cross seal, he called out Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 20 clones poofed into existence around him. Okay, you guys, we need to master the Suiryuden and Kurigakure no Jutsu. Hi. 20 voices called out in unison. I want 10 of you practicing each jutsu. Another round of hi. They all walked up to the edge and looked out across the water before re-shooting through the hand seals and calling out the name of whichever jutsu they were doing. Sitting at the trunk of a tree, he watched them until a voice sounded in his head. Kid, we have some training to do too. What do you mean? We need to force your body into taking more of my chakra. And how do you propose we do that? We pump your body till it can't take no more. Naruto got the feeling that the Kyuubi was smirking evilly right about now. No way, Fox, I could lose control and hurt people. Shut up, Ninjin. It is the only way. And I believe your teacher can seal us in a barrier, so if you are weak-minded enough to succumb to the killing intent, we won't be able to attack anyone. Naruto began thinking about what the fox was suggesting. It would be a serious advantage if it worked. The only con to this plan is that he could succumb to the evil intent and go into feral mode, and hurt people. Standing, Naruto called out to his clones, keep working while I go talk to Kakashi-sensei. They didn't answer. Walking into the clearing where the last met, he saw Sasuke struggling with a higher level Kaden technique. Looking to his right, he saw Naiko slam his hands into the ground, where a few feet in front of him a mound lifted but collapsed a second later. Walking up to Kakashi, he spoke, Kakashi-sensei, I have something to ask you. Kakashi looked away from his book and stared at Naruto for a moment before motioning to go on. You know who has come up with a plan for my body to be able to accept more of his chakra, Naruto explained. So I was wondering if you could set up a barrier around me so in case I lose control I can't hurt anyone. How do you know this isn't just a ruse by him to get free? Kakashi questioned. I won't let him. Naruto told his sensei. Hey, your willpower just might be able to hold him back. I'll tell you what, it'll take me about a half hour to set up the seals, so until I come and collect you, go train. Naruto nodded and ran off into the forest back to his clones. 25 minutes later, after some serious mental training, getting ready for the fox's evil chakra, the sea loans began dispersing in groups of 5. 4 minutes of sorting through memories later, he stood up and walked to the water's edge. Staring into the water, he took a deep breath and ran through some hand seals. Calling out Kurigakure no Jutsu, the already foggy area became even more dense with mist as he poured chakra into the jutsu. Opening his eyes, he could barely see 10 feet in front of him. Smiling at his success, he stopped pouring his chakra into the jutsu, causing the mist to disperse. He rolled up his pant legs and took a few steps into the water. Stopping a few moments to get used to its freezing temperature. He took a deep breath and ran through his hand seals and called out Sweryuden no Jutsu. A large blue dragon made of water shot out of the water, not Ku. Ite as large as Zabuza's or Kakashi's, but large in its own right. It roared and flew over the lake's surface and crashed into the center, creating a large wave. Oops. He closed his eye and covered his head as he wave washed over him and moved onto the shore. Sitting on the shore with a fish on his head was Naruto. Spitting water out of his mouth, he stood up and let the water drip off of him. Clapping came from the edge of the forest as Kakashi walked up to Naruto. "Oh, hey Kakashi-sensei," Naruto said, pulling off his shirt and proceeded to wring the water out. "Hello Naruto. That was a very good water dragon," he complimented. Naruto grinned widely. "So what's up? Is the barrier ready?" Naruto asked, getting excited. "Yes, but I'm gonna have to lay down some rules," Kakashi stated. Naruto nodded. "First, the barrier is going to a little weak since only I will be holding it up. Second, if it gets too out of hand, I will be using this." He held up a piece of paper with the word seal on it. "This is a Kyuubi chakra seal. Hokage-sama had given me this in the hopes that were you to ever tap into the Kyuubi's chakra by accident and lost control, this would forcibly cause the Kyuubi's chakra to retreat back into the seal," he explained. Naruto nodded. "Is that it?" "Yep, we should go set up now," he said, motioning for Naruto to follow him. They stopped in a clearing. Naruto noticed slips of paper on the surrounding trees in roughly the shape of a circle. "Go sit in the center," he heard a voice behind him. Nodding, he did what he was told and sat in the center of the clearing. He watched Kakashi go through many hand seals in rapid succession and slammed his hand on the largest slip of paper. Naruto watched as what looked like chakra string itself to each of the slips of paper until the medan disappeared, leaving a giant wall of chakra in its place. "Get on with it then," he heard a strained voice coming from Kakashi's direction. Nodding, he sat in a meditation position and fell into his mindscape. Upon hearing the dripping sound his sewer of a mind produced, he opened his eyes and found he was already at the cage. Walking up to the bars, he saw a giant red eye open. "Okay Fox, how we gonna do this? You see that door over there?" Naruto glanced and nodded. "You see how it says repressed on it?" "Nod. That mean repressed chakra. You go in there and take some of my repressed chakra." Naruto nodded again and turned his back from the Kyuubi, therefore missing the malicious smirk that crossed its face. He searched the door for a sign that the Kyuubi was trying to trick him. Finding none, he took a deep breath and entered. What he didn't know was that the Kyuubi had some control over his environment and had manipulated the door so it was missing one vital word. Memories. Kakashi stood there with both hands on the master seal, keeping a close eye on Naruto, wondering what was taking so long. Kakashi wasn't prepared for any of the things that had happened in that second. A blast of intense killing intent filled the area, and 2 scared gasps behind him. His visible eye widened. "Shit." He looked behind him and stared at his 2 other terrified students. "What are you 2 doing here?" he asked them in a panicked voice. He didn't get an answer. They were stuck transfixed on what was happening to Naruto. He turned and stared at the blonde as a red aura enveloped him, flickering like a flame. "What's happening in that head of yours, Naruto?" Naruto stood there, watching the scene in unveiled horror as he watched his 10-year-old self exhaust his chakra running away from the hate-filled crowd. He stood there watching as they caught and proceeded to beat him and torture him in so many horrible ways that I'm not going to go into detail. Naruto watched on and suddenly wondered what that day's date was. He heard a voice whisper it in his mind and his eyes widened. This was one of his blackouts. You see, ever since Naruto was small, sometimes when he was caught by a mob he would wake up the next day in the hospital and not be able to recall what happened the night before. He called them his blackouts. Suddenly, Naruto felt a tugging sensation and he fell out of the door and back onto the floor of the cage. He stared at the ceiling with blank eyes, processing everything he just saw. With a heavy heave he turned onto his side and started dry heaving. Since they were in his mind nothing came out. Getting on his knees he turned and glared at the red eye of the Kyuubi. What the hell was that? Your repressed memories. The fox stated. Why did you lie to me? He demanded. Foolish ninja, I'm a demon. And would you really haven't you gone in there if I had told you the truth? Naruto stared at the fox before muttering something. What was that? I said, probably not. Naruto stated. The Kyuubi just chuckled. Why couldn't I remember those events? Like I said, they were repressed. But they were forcibly repressed. The Kyuubi stated. What? The Kyuubi rolled its eyes at his stupidity. They were led there by the third Hokage after each event. He was scared that if you saw them, you'd hate the village and want revenge. And judging by your expression he was right. Naruto's expression was livid. The Sandaime was messing with his memories without his permission. They're going to be hell to pay when they got back. Suddenly a thought hit Naruto. What's happening on the outside? Your body is in what I like to call the cubified state. It's at its limit. I was holding back my chakra so you wouldn't, in your heightened emotional state, pull out more than you can handle. The fox explained. Naruto nodded and left. He felt himself sitting in a meditation position and thought to the fox, whenever you're ready. Naruto heard a grunt and suddenly felt something trying to fight its way into his mind. He pushed it back with all his willpower. He opened his eyes and suddenly his vision was filled with a red bubbly shroud. What the hell? He thought to himself. Oh, out of nowhere he felt the urge to rip everything in his path apart. Still being in mental turmoil he gave in to the urge and began tearing into anything he could get his hands on. Outside of the barrier his three teammates watched on in horror as they saw the flame-like aura disappear and watched as bubbly substance began covering his body, leaving one tail to sway carelessly as he sat there. Suddenly his eyes opened and his visage became one of rage and he began destroying everything around him. Kakashi began to call to him, Naruto. Calm down. Don't let the chakra control you. Naruto's head snapped in their direction. He fell to his hands and on all fours ran up to the barrier's edge. He stared into Kakashi's eye and suddenly Kakashi understood that it wasn't the Kyuubi making Naruto destroy everything. Naruto was doing it himself. Naruto's eyes went distant for a moment as a deep voice sounded in his head, you've set a new limit. The state you are in is the one tail. Ed Fox cloak, it increases your strength by almost double but it causes you harm. Naruto looked down to his right arm which was numb and unusable at the moment, I've noticed. And when you've used up all the chakra the cloak gives you. Unless I supply more, you will fall unconscious. How much left? None. Suddenly Naruto fell to his knees and the cloak began receding. Kakashi watched as Naruto fell unconscious. He sighed as he stopped his flow of chakra to the seals. He fell onto a knee and checked Naruto's vitals just in case, and found him in near-perfect condition. He CKED him and motioned his students to follow him. Kakashi-sensei. What was that? Naiko asked. That is something Naruto should tell you. But let him tell you on his own. The Wo kids looked at Naruto's unconscious form and wondered what that red chakra was again. Naruto opened his eyes to see the black shadowed ceiling of the seal. Turning his head to the right he saw the cage. Looking through the bars he saw the faintly glowing eyes of the nine-tailed demon fox. He sat up and stared at the fox for what felt like 5 minutes. Finally the Kyuubi spoke. Finally awake, are we? What? How long have I been unconscious? Naruto asked in a quiet voice. Approximately 3 days, was his answer. He closed his eyes and sighed, then he nodded. What are you feeling right now? The fox asked unexpectedly, his voice curious. Naruto thought for several moments before answering. Angry, I suppose. Sad too. The blonde sighed and ran a hand through his blonde locks. I just can't believe the third would mess with my memories. Horrible as they were, I'd rather he didn't mess with them. As I've explained, he did it to keep you from hating the village. Too bad, he failed. Naruto spat. The Kyuubi's expression was of terrifying malicious glee. The expression gave Naruto pause. That was your plan, wasn't it? It was more of a statement more than a question. Kyuubi's expression told him he was correct in his assumption. Closing his eyes he sighed, whatever. The fox started cackling. When we get back to the village, I want you to act like your old self. before we left, can't have anybody suspecting your anger. Naruto opened his eyes and stared at the fox, before nodding his head. He didn't know why he was going along with the fox's plan. But he couldn't think of anything better at the moment. So he sighed and resigned himself to following the fox's plans. You need to wake in the physical world soon. I can't sense anything out there when you're in here with me. Kyuubi said. Naruto nodded and forced himself to wake up. Opening his eyes in the physical world, he noticed it was about midday and the room was empty. Slipping out of the bed, he noted his muscles were stiff from 3 days of disuse. Stretching quietly, he slipped on his gear, which was leaning against the wall by bead, and headed out of the room and into the living area. Seeing it empty, he got confused. Hearing a disturbance in the next room over, he silently crept over to the door and peered through a crack. He saw 2 men standing in the room staring at something not in his field of vision. He looked at the man on the right. He had gray hair and looked to be about 5'7". He carried a large katana and wore a purple hat, gray hooded long sleeve with many pockets, and black shorts. He turned his eyes to the man on the left. He had brown hair with a small beard on his chin. He also carried a large katana. He had no shirt and many tattoos on the left side of his torso. Letting out a short breath, Naruto slipped back and wondered what he was gonna do when a voice rang out in his head. Kill them, obviously. What? Naruto blinked. Kill them. The fox stated again, bluntly. They are here for a reason, probably to kill you, or one of the drunken ninja's family. But, what if they aren't? He asked, not wanting to kill. Listen in, then. If they are plotting anything like that, then you have to kill them. Naruto remained silent and quietly placed his ear to the door. Zori, we need to hurry up. The big one said to the shorter. I know, Waraji. Get up, woman, you're coming with us. The one known as Zori said, unsheathing his sword in an intimidating way. Waraji looked around. What if someone is still in the house besides the woman? Kill them, obviously. Go take a look around if you want, but hurry it up. We need to take her back to Gato. Waraji nodded and started towards the door Naruto was behind. See, they are going to try something like kill you. You need to do it before they can. They are not ninja, so it should be easy. Kyuubi stated. Naruto grudgingly accepted that he'd have to kill someone today and slipped into the shadows, unsheathing his dagger-tail sword, Kage no Shi. The runes glowed a deep, blood red, as if in anticipation of the blood it would be spilling. His eyes shifting into the 3rd level of the Sharingan as he stood, concealed in the shadows. The door swung open. The large man walked in and looked around, closing the door behind him, a stupid move. Naruto took a slow and quiet deep breath. Think of him as one of those villagers who hated you so much. Kyuubi's voice rang out in his head and he felt anger rush through his veins, giving the resolve to do this deed. Taking another deep breath, he shot forward while Waraji wasn't looking. Stabbing Kage no Shi approximately where the heart should be. Quickly sliding the sword out, he kicked the man to his knees and swiftly decapitated him. Waraji's head rolled, eventually stopping with its unseeing eyes on Naruto, who stood there as the adrenaline faded and he realized what he had done. Now is not the time for this, damn it. The fox's voice filled his head. Calm the hell down and dispose of the other. Then we need to find your team. Kyuubi ordered. Naruto nodded, taking a few calming breaths. Getting fed up with waiting, Zori pointed his sword warningly at Tsunami and ground out a quick, stay there, and started walking towards the door Naruto was pulling himself together behind. Kicking the door open, he saw a boy standing over the corpse of his partner holding a bloody, ominously glowing sword. Ah! He gave a small shout of surprise before anger filled him and he ran at the boy, raising his sword on the way. Naruto wasn't ready for the thug to come smashing on the door to the room he was in, so when the door suddenly flew open with a bang he froze in surprise, which was a bad moon on his part, as he ended up getting a slash on his arm when he dodged the monster's strike too late. Grabbing his arm, he stared at the angry thug who noticed his active Sharingan. Disregarding it, he ran at Naruto again with the intent on slashing him to little pieces. Naruto forced fire chakra into Kage no Shi and the effect was similar to a watered-down version of Dagateru Gijutsu. Kenfuramingu, except the runes weren't glowing orange, they were still glowing deep crimson. He swung the flaming chain links, cutting open Zori's arm and setting his jacket aflame. The chain links reattached to each other and Naruto substituted with Waraji's sword, which was Bahi. Nd Zori, and he swiftly slice a gaping wound through Zori's back, ending it again with a decapitation. Naruto slowly dropped to his knees, heaved, and emptied his stomach onto the floor where the It mixed with the blood and created a sickening goop which made Naruto throw up even more. Shaking, he stood up and stumbled into the next room where Tsunami was sitting on the ground with her eyes closed, holding Inari's unconscious figure. Tsunami. His voice came out shaky and cracked on the last syllable. Her eyes snapped open to see Naruto covered in blood standing there with a faintly glowing sword in his hand. "Oh my god, Naruto. Are you all right?" she exclaimed. "I'm fine," he reassured. "They are dead," he said, his voice cracking again. "I need to know where my team is," he said urgently. "They went to the bridge with father this morning," she answered. "Thank you," he said quickly, running out of the house, towards the bridge. Kakashi looked up from his book as they came upon bridge, his visible eye widening. All along the bridge bodies lie, some looked to be still breathing. Tazuna ran up to one of the bodies and asked in a panicked voice, "What happened here?" The man's half-lidded eyes shifted to Tazuna's face as he spoke in a weak trembling voice, "A monster attacked." His breath died out as he expired. Tazuna closed his eyes and offered a short prayer for the deceased on the bridge. Suddenly, a thick mist began rolling in. Kakashi started everybody, defensive formation around Tazuna. The three ninja jumped into action and surrounded Tazuna, each holding a kunai in each hand. "Kakashi-sensei, this is the Kirigakur no Jutsu, isn't it?" came the determined voice of Naiko. "Yes," Kakashi replied, seeing movement through the mist. He tensed and said, "Here they come." Suddenly, a group of Zabuza clones closed in on Team 7, each carrying a kunai each. Kakashi smirked. "Sasuke, looks like you're up first." The lone female on Team 7 smirked and showed excellent speed as she quickly dispatched the clones, leaving a large puddle of water around the team. "Looks like I've underestimated you." A deep voice rang out through the mist. The team looked towards where the voice had come from, and the mist thinned to the point they could see Zabuza and the mysterious hunter Nin. However, a CL1's strength is but 1/10 of the original's, so you couldn't hope to best the real me. The demon of the mist smirked, making Sasuke scowl. "Your turn, Haku." Zabuza's smirk still plainly visible on his face. The hunter Nin nodded and shot forward, straight at Sasuke. Sasuke held both of her kunai in a defensive position as Haku's Senbon impacted upon them. Her eyes shifted into the level 2 Sharingan 1, and she shot at Haku, raising her kunai in an offensive position as she ran. Haku stopped running and threw several small Senbon towards non-lethal, but paralyzing areas on Sasuke's body. Sasuke, for her part, blocked all the small needles and ran through hand signs and called out, "Kaden, Enden no Jutsu," and fired a stream of fire from her mouth. Haku dodged and got in close to started using quick and painful taijutsu jabs that Sasuke had no problem following with her Sharingan active. Soon, the two started a fast-paced taijutsu match. Kakashi stared at the tall demon of the mist that stood 10 feet in front of him. Zabuza smirked. "Talented student you got there, but she stands no chance against Haku." "Oh, and why's that?" Kakashi asked, slipping his hands in an offensive position as he got ready to attack. Haku's Kekkei Genkai, the Hyouden creation, allow him to take water and freeze it into various forms of ice, and if you look around, we are surrounded by water. So your student has little chance of survival. Zabuza's smirk never left his face. Kakashi looked over to his student to see she was surrounded by needles of ice. Confident in his student's abilities, he focused back on Zabuza. "Naiko, with me. Do you remember that jutsu I taught you?" Receiving a nod, he continued, "I want you to use it on his sword. Think you're up for it?" "Yes, Kakashi-sensei," Naiko replied. "Good, let's go." They both shot towards Zabuza, leaving Tazuna standing there hoping no harm would come to him. Sasuke landed on her feet, staring at the spot she was just about to be impaled by hundreds of ice needles. She looked back up at the masked ninja and growled. The boy just stood there without emotion. Sasuke threw a few more kunai at him and ran through more hand signs, calling out Kaden, Gukaku no Jutsu, and fired a giant fireball at him. Haku just dodged and called forth more ice needles, firing them at Sasuke, who just barely dodged, taking a few in non-lethal places. Grunting, Sasuke pulled the needles out and threw them to the ground where they shattered. "You are strong, Sasuke Uchiha, but you cannot best me," Haku said as he held up his hands in a hand seal and spoke, "Maku Hyusho." The water surrounding the pair rose up and formed into mirrors of ice. Sasuke looks around watching as the mirrors formed a dome around them. She looked back at Haku as he slipped into the mirror behind him, and then all the mirrors held his image. Sasuke got nervous as all the images of Haku held up a handful of Senbon before each image through them. "Doden. Chukajugan no Jutsu." Naiko called out, attempting to touch Zabuza's sword. Failing again, he got cut before jumping back and letting Kakashi jump in and attack Zabuza. Holding his wound, Naiko looked to make sure Tazuna was still unharmed. Sighing in relief, he turned to the fight and ran through the hand signs again and called out the jutsu, "Doden. Chukajugan no Jutsu." For the 5th time he ran towards Zabuza and finally, after much failure, successfully grabbed Zabuza's cleaver, adding a ton of weight to it, making it harder for Zabuza to utilize his weapon. Cursing, Zabuza jumped back and formed a bunch of water clones and sent them after Naiko. Naiko easily dispatched the clones and was about to re-enter the fight against Zabuza when he heard the distinct splash a destroyed water clone made. As it was destroyed, looking around he saw the source of the noise as a blood-stained Naruto had just dispatched a clone that had just attempted to sneak up behind Tazuna and kill him. "Naruto, you're awake," Naiko exclaimed. Kakashi turned from his fight with Zabuza to see Naruto standing there, both his cloths and sword covered in blood. Mentally pushing that to the back of his mind, he called out, "Naruto, help Sasuke." He looked up at Kakashi and quickly nodded. He ran to the dome of mirrors. "Naiko, you've done enough, thank you. Go now, and protect Tazuna from any more attacks." Quickly nodding, Naiko ran to Tazuna and got in a defensive stance. Naruto stood outside the dome wondering what he was gonna do. Shrugging, the flip through a few hand sings and said, "Sweden, Sweryuden no Jutsu." A water dragon rose up from the water under the bridge and slammed into the mirrors, cracking the ones it hit. But the cracks quickly fixed themselves using that water the dragon left behind. Cursing quietly, Naruto went through a few more hand signs and sucked in a lungful of air. Fuden, Renkuden no Jutsu. He shot the fist-size bullet of highly compressed air into the mirrors and shattered the one it hit. Naruto ran in before the mirror could reform. Sasuke looked surprised at the blonde and even more surprised at his stained cloths. "What are you doing here, Naruto?" "Kakashi-sensei told me to help you, so here I am," he said quietly. She just nodded. Naruto looked around at the mirrors where Haku stood. Accessing this new threat, he brought up a handful of Senbon and threw them at the blonde, who quickly pulled up his sword and deflected half while dodging the other. Denly his image appeared in every mirror and began raining Senbon down on them. They both dodged a majority of the needles but took a bit of damage. Wincing, Naruto pulled out the most movement inhibiting needles and shifted his eyes into the Sharingan. He held up his sword and watched the masked ninja closely. Suddenly, he had an idea. He made a shadow clone and sent it to escape the mirrors. It was destroyed as it reached the dome's boundary. Clenching his teeth, there seemed to be no escape. He doubted the foe hunter Nin would allow him the time to use the Renkuden again. Sasuke, who was watching the clone, noticed something. "Naruto, do that again." Looking confused, he did so. "Did you see it?" Seeing his confused face, she said again, "Look more closely." After doing as she said, he noticed a blur fly from one mirror to the next, destroying the clone. "The reason you cannot defeat me," the boy in the mirrors spoke, "is because you cannot destroy your hearts and become true shinobi." Sasuke just glared at Haku, while Naruto flinched as the gruesome scene from Tazuna's house replayed in his mind. "Stop it, calm down, freaking out will get you and Sasuke-chan killed," he mentally reprimanded himself. Haku turned into a blur again, flying through the mirrors, handfuls upon handfuls of needles at the pair. Naruto, who was lost in thought, took the brunt of the attack, luckily nowhere lethal. However, he was in a lot of pain. "Ow, damn it." He glared heatedly at Haku, who stood stationary in the mirrors. He put his hands in a ram seal, and sent a blast of chakra through his body, forcibly ejecting the needles from his body. He glared up at Haku and pulled up his sword. Let's go. Kakashi stared down Zabuza. Both looked battle-weary. Kakashi chanced a glance at the dome of mirrors and thought, they're having trouble, I need to finish this quickly. Looking back at Zabuza, he stood up straight and put his hand to his Hitayate and pulled in off his Sharingan eye. Zabuza's smirk shrank a bit as he stared at the eye. Is that all you can do, Kakashi? He taunted. Kakashi showed no outward reaction. He simply ran towards Zabuza, his eye spinning fast, and attempted to stab him with a kunai, which was parried by Zabuza's kunai. They went at it like this for a few seconds till Zabuza jumped back and threw his kuna at Kakashi and disappeared into the mist. Kakashi sidestepped the kunai and scanned the surrounding mist, carefully listening for any incoming attacks. A sound caught his attention, like a faint whistling sound coming straight at his back. His eyes widened, he span around and proceeded to knock the 5 shuriken out of the air. Letting out a breath, he sent out a chakra pulse that cleared the immediate area of mist. Quickly scanning the mist for any sign of Zabuza, he ran through a few hand signs and kneeled down, bit his thumb and slammed his hand on the ground. Kuchio's Oak engulfed Kakashi as a few pops were heard. When the smoke cleared, nin dogs were standing around Kakashi. Pakken, I need you and your pack sniff out the missing nin Zabuza. Got it, Kakashi, the little dog said. They ran off into the mist. Naruto panted as he slumped his shoulders. All this dodging was tiring him out quickly. He glanced over at Sasuke and seen she was in a similar state. They were getting tired out too quickly. If this continued, one of them would die. No, I won't allow that to happen. Naruto's mind shouted. If only there was a way to shatter his mirrors and get him out into the open. Naruto's mind ran frantically, trying to formulate a plan that would get Haku out of his mirrors. It's useless, Haku said suddenly. They both looked at him. No amount of planning will help you survive. I refuse to die here. Naruto shouted at the boy in the mirror. I refuse to lie down and allow you to kill us. The Tomo in his eyes spinning angrily. You don't have a choice, Haku stated, disappearing from his current mirror and reappearing in another. How can you hope to catch me, even with those eyes? He mocked. Naruto growled and forced chakra into Kage no Shi, forcing it to take on its dagger tail form. Dagateru Gijutsu. Ken Furamingu. He swung the flaming chain-linked sword at Haku's mirrors savagely, and doing little damage. Letting out a shout of anger, he began punching the mirrors with all his strength, doing little more than leaving cracks, which fixed themselves up anyway. Naruto was just about to start his onslaught again when a blur entered the mirror and a foot slammed into his gut, sending him rolling back into the center of the dome. Ow! He mumbled as the kick knocked the breath from his lungs. He glanced at Sasuke to see her fire a rather sizable fireball at the mirrors. Rolling onto his stomach, he stood up and had an idea. Sasuke, come here, he called out. She turned and nodded, rolling out of the way and towards him as Senbon rained down on her previous position. Use the Gukaku, he told her. Nodding, they both ran through a few hand seals. Kaden, Gokaku no Jutsu. Fuden, Daitapa no Jutsu. Both bringing their hands to their mouths, they blew fire and wind respectively. The large fireball met the strong blast of air and increased in size and intensity. The large ball of flames flew and slammed through the mirrors, continuing on, eventually burning out, leaving a rather large hole in the mirrors. Naruto and Sasuke ran full speed at the hole, but Haku was faster. He pumped his chakra into his mirrors, causing them to form faster than normal. They were fully reformed by the time the 2 genin had reached them. Damn it! Naruto yelled out. He glared at the masked ninja in the mirrors. They jumped back into the center of the dome. Naruto cursed and started running through plans in his head again, not noticing Haku readying another onslaught of Senbon needles. He pulled back his arm and took aim primarily at Naruto. Sasuke's eyes widened as she noticed who Haku's target was. As the masked nin flung the needles at Naruto, Sasuke flung herself at Naruto and knocked him aside, taking the onslaught herself. Naruto was shocked as he stared at the unmoving figure of his best friend and crush. Getting on his hands and knees, he crawled over to her and flipped her so she was facing upwards. Sasuke-chan, his voice shocked. Sasuke-chan, he was getting frantic. No, no, this can't be happening, he shouted in his head. Sasuke, he shouted, his voice filled with panic. And Naruto. A frail voice caught his attention. He looked down and saw Sasuke looking at him with half-lidded eyes. I'm sorry, she said. No, don't die, he said, his voice showing his anguish. Please, this is my fault, if only I wasn't so engrossed in my planning. Tears flowing, he looked down at his best friend as she closed her eyes. No, 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 he shouted. He felt as though everything around him was crumbling, falling into a black void. He turned and looked at the masked boy in the mirrors, who stood watching the interaction with little interest. Is this the first time you've seen someone die in battle? He said. Naruto's rage bubbled as he glared at the masked boy. I will kill you. The words came out of his mouth as he suddenly felt a spike of severe pain in his eyes. Disregarding it, he gave himself to the feeling of bloodlust and killing intent that he felt bubbling just beneath the surface. The chakra was unmistakable, blood red, dangerous, and very powerful. Naruto allowed himself to be taken by the chakra and he flew towards Haku, who was shocked by Naruto's transformation to have ample time to dodge, was again shocked as the fist the enraged boy threw smashed straight through his ice mirror and sent him flying down the bridge. Akashi felt a wave of heat and the distinct feel of darkness just as his Ninken alerted him that they had found Zabuza. Turning towards his student's fight against Haku, he gasped as he watched the mirrors shatter and disintegrate before hitting the ground, where he saw Sasuke lying in the center of it looking slightly like a porcupine. No, he turned more to the side and saw Naruto on all fours covered by a flame of red flying after Haku, who was flying through the air, head tilted to the side as though he'd been punched. Kakashi put it together in his head quickly and cursed. Haku muse. Have gotten Sasuke and sent Naruto into a rage. Naiko, check on Sasuke. He called to the last of his team and turned back to where his Ninken were scuffling with Zabuza. With Kakashi's help, Ey managed to subdue him and hold him down. Damn it, Zabuza cursed as he struggled against the dogs. He glared up at Kakashi, who was glaring down at him. This is the end for you, Momochi Zabuza, he stated. Zabuza just continued to glare vehemently. Kakashi pulled out a kunai and stalked towards his downed opponent. Any last words? Zabuza closed his eyes and tried one last time to loosen the hold Kakashi's Ninken had on him. Failing, he gave up and hung his head as his death was upon him. He looked over at Haku and sighed, silently apologizing to the boy who was like a son to him. He closed his eyes and waited. Kakashi lifted his kunai and closed his eyes and struck, quickly slicing the head off of his foe. With a roar, the cubified Naruto raced down the bridge after the flying body of his foe, Haku. Passing the body, he stopped and raised his interlocked fingers above his head, slamming his fists down like a hammer. Haku gasped in pain as he slammed into He ground and felt the bridge crack under the impact. Groaning, he looked up into the strange-looking eyes Naruto's Sharingan had morphed into while they glared down at him. Naruto raised his foot and slammed it down on his face, shattering the hunterman mask Haku was wearing, revealing the effeminate boy's face. Naruto growled out, Why did you kill her? He raised his foot again and slammed it into the boy's chest. Coughing blood, he replied, We do what we must to protect those precious to us. Naruto bent down and grabbed the boy's shirt and hefted him up. You didn't have to kill her, he shouted in Haku's face as he pulled back his fist and sent the boy flying back down the bridge. Haku hit the ground and rolled several feet before coming to a stop. Groaning, he slowly rose to one knee and glanced at the enraged blonde who started quickly advancing on him. Taking a few steps back, he took a look at the rest of the bridge and what he saw made his insides freeze. His precious Zabuza-sama was dead. His breath left his body as Naruto's fist slammed into his chest. He grabbed the blonde's wrist and attempted to throw him over the bridge, but this endeavor failed as he just grabbed the rail and flipped back up. Haku stared at Naruto as he readied a kunai made of ice. He bared his teeth at the feral boy. Pulling up the kunai, he ran at the blonde at top speeds. Pulling it up, he slashed at Naruto, who attempted to dodge but got a slash on the cheek. Haku gasped when the wound healed almost immediately. He created a mirror and appeared a few feet away from him. Holding up his hand, he did a few one-handed seals, Sensatsu Susho. Frozen needles of ice rose into the air and surrounded Naruto, Suddenly they all rained down upon the enraged blonde as Haku gave the mental order. Seeing the blonde on the ground, Haku gave a small sigh of relief and sadness. He really didn't want to kill anybody. Suddenly he heard a grunt. He turned to the fallen boy, who apparently hadn't been killed by his ice Senbon. I'm nearly out of chakra. I can't use the Makyu Hyusho. Sigh, even if I did, he'd probably break out anyway. Haku watched as the boy stared at him for a few moments, then took a deep breath of air. What is he doing? Suddenly a loud roar came out of Naruto's mouth and Haku found it was pure chakra being fired at him as he was flung backwards and into the railing. Groaning, he looked up at the blonde who stood staring straight at him with a glare that could melt metals. Naruto glared at the ice-manipulating boy who killed his best friend. He would kill him slowly. There would be no mercy for the boy who dared hurt the girl he liked. A deep chuckle made itself known in his head. What the hell are you laughing about, Fox? Your eyes, human, they have changed again, came the reply. What? Naruto looked down at his reflection and felt the Kyuubi's chakra fade away as he stood in shock at what he saw. The crimson eyes of the Sharingan staring at him, but they were different. They no longer held the 3 tomo of the level 3 Sharingan. Instead, it held the design that vaguely looked like the vortex shuriken he wanted to buy one time. Fox, what is this? It is called the Mangekyo Sharingan. It is a very powerful level of the Sharingan. Kyuubi explained. Naruto no. DDED and looked back up at the ice manipulator who was running at him again. Naruto noticed that the boy was running even slower than when he was at the 3rd level of the regular Sharingan. Pulling up his own kunai, Naruto ran at the ice manipulator, and the two engaged in a fierce kunai battle. Naruto knocked the ice kunai out of Haku's hand and brought up his unlocked dagger tail. Dagator Ugijutsu, Ken Furamingu. The links burst into flame and Naruto slashed at Haku, who jumped back last minute. Naruto growled as he jumped forward and started swinging the dagger tail in a flurry of strikes that Haku either blocked or dodged. Snarling, Naruto turned up the heat and swung faster until the dagger tail was just a blur of orange flames. Haku jumped back several feet and trapped Naruto's feet in a block of ice, causing him to trip. Growling, Naruto sent a blast of chakra to his feet and shattered the ice. Getting up, he lunged at Haku, who stepped back into a mirror of ice and appeared behind Naruto, launching a handful of Senbon at the blonde's back. Turning, Naruto swung the flaming sword at the needles, sending them flying away from him. He lunged at Haku again, his dagger tail back in its locked sword form, but still flaming. He swung at the feminine boy, who pulled up a kunai to block. Snarling, Naruto pushed harder. And so, it became a battle of wills. Growling, Haku pulled up a second kunai and made to stab Naruto, but the blonde jumped back at the last moment. Haku lunged forward at a speed that slightly outmatched Naruto's. Naruto could only watch in slow motion as the feminine boy shot forward and slammed a fist into his stomach, sending Naruto reeling. He watched in slow motion as Haku's sandaled foot slammed into his face, sending him flying a few feet away. Naruto growled as he rolled into a standing position. He suddenly felt a build-up of chakra behind his right eye. Instinctively, he closed his left eye as one word echoed in his mind. Opening his mouth, he spoke. Amaterasu. A plume of black flames shot out of his right eye and flew at the black-haired boy. Snapping out of his shock, he tried to create an ice mirror, only to find he was out of chakra. Turning to stare at flames as dark as the void, one thought crossed his mind as the black flames burned away his life. I'm sorry, I failed you, Zabuza-sama, Naruto grunted as he grabbed at his right eye that severely hurt. Feeling some wetness, Naruto pulled his hand away expecting to see tears, but instead blood stained his hand. Wiping it away, he looked at what his technique did. He stared at the mass of black flames as they burned away at the now dead Haku. Willing them away, Naruto picked up his sword and slipped it into its sheath and sighed. This was the sight Gato and his thug army came across when they made it to the bridge. Smirking, the short fat man spoke. Ha ha, this saves us a lot of trouble. Frowning, Kakashi asked, how so? Gato's smirk widened. I was never planning on paying them at all. I was planning on having my team here kill them after they finished with you. But, it appears you're all stronger than I've given you credit for. Therefore, You four will meet your unfortunate end by their blades. Naruto growled and took a deep breath, pulling the fox's chakra into his lungs. Naruto, calm down. Kakashi's voice rang out. Vortex shuriken-shaped eyes glanced at the copycat ninja, and he gasped. Those eyes, are they an evolution of the Sharingan? Naruto turned back to the crowd and let out the loud demon chakra-enhanced roar, sending them rolling backwards into their mates and making them fall over. Naruto. Kakashi's voice rang out again. Naruto closed his eyes and nodded. He turned back to the straightening out crowd of thugs and put his hands in a cross shape and called out, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 10 Narutos pulled their Kage no Shi out of its sheath. Kaka-sensei. Naruto's normal voice called out, Mangekyo Sharingan spinning in each shadow clone's eyes, let's go. Nodding, Kakashi created a handful of his own shadow clones, each pulling out a kunai. They rushed forward, aiming to disable. They slashed at legs, broke bones with the blunt ends of their weapons and generally knocked them out. At last, they stood in front of the fat little tyrant. Naruto raised his sword for a killing blow but found Kakashi holding it as he was about to swing. What are you doing, Kakashi-sensei? Don't. Why not? He's a tyrant. Besides, it's his fault. Naruto spoke, his rage unmistakable. Kakashi looked at his student for a moment. What is? That Sasuke-chan died. If he didn't want to keep Tazuna from building the bridge, we would have never came here. And then Sasuke-chan wouldn't have died. He yelled at his teacher. Kakashi looked over to where Sasuke lay, and saw Naiko picking Senbon needles out of her. He turned back to Naruto, who was glaring at the cowering tyrant. Sighing, Kakashi spoke, I can't just let you kill him. Naruto growled, his vortex shuriken-shaped eyes glaring at his teacher. Why won't you let me get my revenge? Naruto yelled at him. Because, killing for revenge will only lead you down a path I do not wish for any of my students. Kakashi said, looking sadly at Naruto, who closed his eyes and finally slumped in defeat and let go of the sword in Kakashi's hand. Kakashi slipped on a mask of cold indifference and walked up to Gato. Gato, I am your judge, and I will be your executor. You have committed heinous crimes against the people of Wave, therefore I find you guilty. Your punishment, death. He pulled a kunai out and slit the fat mon's throat. A gasp came from behind them. Turning, they both saw Naiko's hand on Sasuke's neck. What is it? Kakashi called. It's really faint, but there's a pulse. He called back excitedly. What? Let me see. Naruto quickly ran over and put his hand on Sasuke's neck and closed his eyes, hoping to feel a widely when he felt the weak beat of her pulse. He snatched her up in his arms and hugged her tight. Ugh, Dobi, I can't breathe. A tired voice came from the girl in Naruto's arms. Oh, sorry Sasuke-chan. Naruto said with a small smile on his face. I'm so tired, Sasuke said as she closed her eyes. Her breathing evened out, indicating she was asleep. Naruto picked her up and put her on his back. Naruto closed his eyes and they began their trek back to Tazuna's home. Kakashi looked at Naruto for a few moments, before deciding to speak. Are you alright, Naruto? Naruto thought for a few moments. No. Kakashi looked at his student and sighed. Do you want to talk about what happened? Naruto was silent for a few moments. I've killed 3 people today, Kakashi-sensei. I feel numb. I feel like I don't care that I've killed them. It's bothering me. Kakashi looked at his student. 3 people. Naruto looked at his teacher. Yes, back at the house when I woke up, there were 2 samurai thugs there, on Gato's orders, to kidnap Tsunami-san. But they attacked me, and I killed them. And then on the bridge, I killed that boy, Haku, with these black flames, I didn't even know I could use. Kakashi looked at his student pensively. Naruto, you did what you had to do. Killing is the life of shinobi. It's kill or be killed. You're gonna have to get used to it. Naruto looked down and nodded. Naiko and Tazuna looked at Naruto with sympathy. A week later, Sasuke had recovered and the bridge had been completed. Team 7 found themselves standing on the unnamed bridge as they looked at the crowd of people that wished them farewell. Team 7 smiled and waved to everybody as they started their trek back to Konoha. Naruto turned around and threw on a big smile for the crowd and gave a big wave and yelled out, farewell. Land of Wave. Turning around, the 3 began their long journey back to Konoha. Oi, Tazuna-san, the bridge needs a name. A villager called out. You're right, What should we call it? I know. How about the super mega awesome Tazuna Bridge? Tazuna shouted out energetically. The crowd face faulted. One villager called out, how about the Great Konoha Bridge? In honor of the Konoha ninja who helped free our land. This name was greatly received by the village, and so the bridge was dubbed the Great Konoha Bridge. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.